Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Teresa Halbach. Teresa was born on March 22, 1980, in a family of 5 siblings. Her parents, Richard and Karen, raised her on their family dairy farm. Tragically, her father passed away when she was 8. Later, Karen married Richard's brother, Thomas, and they raised their blended family together. Teresa loved the outdoors and dreamed of becoming a photojournalist for National Geographic. Her friends commented that she had a special ability to make people feel welcome. She is a very studious person and graduated summa cum laude with a degree in photography from the University of Wisconsin-Green Bay. After graduation, Teresa continued working with Pierce Photography, where she had interned during college. She started her own business, Photography by Teresa, operating out of the Pierce studio. Teresa traveled widely and took freelance jobs with Auto Trader magazine, photographing vehicles for sale to supplement her income. Unfortunately, this job led to her untimely death. All the evidence pointed to one person, Steven Avery. Steven contacted Teresa to arrange a photo shoot of his sister's minivan. Records show she was last seen at 2:30 p.m. that day, a fact confirmed by Steven's nephew, Bobby, who reported seeing the car enter the salvage yard. Steven was first charged with a weapons violation, as he was a convicted felon. On November 11, 2005, he was charged with Teresa's murder, kidnapping, sexual assault, and mutilation of a corpse. Steven's blood was found in Teresa's SUV, and her car keys were discovered in his room. Throughout, Steven claimed he was innocent and that the police were framing him. At the time, he was involved in a $36 million civil lawsuit against Manitowoc County. Steven Avery, born on July 9, 1962, is from Manitowoc County, Wisconsin. He grew up with his 2 brothers, Charles and Earl, and his sister Barbara, raised by their parents, Dolores and Alan. He dropped out of high school, and it was reported that he had an IQ of 70. He had several run-ins with the law. In 1981, Steven spent 10 months in jail for burglarizing a bar. The following year, he was convicted of animal cruelty for pouring gasoline on his pet cat and throwing it into a bonfire, for which he served an additional 9 months. In 1985, he threatened his cousin, Sharon Morris, by chasing her out onto the street and pointing a gun at her, allegedly because he wanted her to stop spreading rumors about him. Sharon filed a report accusing him of repeatedly leaving naked and waiting in the front yard. Although he received a 6-year sentence for this crime, but then he was granted bail. Next was a case of mistaken identity, causing him to suffer an unjust prison sentence of nearly 20 years. On July 29, 1985, Penny Bernson reported that she was attacked and assaulted while walking on the beach near 2 rivers. The police thought the description of suspect she provided closely matched Steven. He was then arrested and charged with the attack on Penny. A state-appointed forensic official testified that a hair found on Steven's shirt was consistent with that of Penny. This evidence led to his conviction in December 1985, despite 16 witness statements and a time-stamped receipt proving his whereabouts at the time of the attack. Steven was convicted of rape and attempted murder and was sentenced to 32 years in prison. He maintained his innocence and appealed in 1987 and 1996, but both appeals were denied by the higher courts. In 2001, Steven contacted the Wisconsin Innocence Project, which took on his case. In 2002, DNA evidence proved his innocence, and Steven was exonerated. It was later discovered that the suspect in Penny's attack was Gregory Allen, and he confessed in 1995. Gregory and Steven looked very similar, and although Gregory committed a similar crime in the same area and was under police surveillance, but he was not considered a suspect. Gregory was not even included in the lineup of suspects. After spending 18 years in prison, Steven was freed on September 11, 2003. He then filed a $36 million civil lawsuit against former Sheriff Thomas Sowinski and former District Attorney Dennis Bogle. His freedom, however, would not last long. When Teresa was reported missing, searches were conducted at the junkyard, the last place where she had been seen, as confirmed by Steven's nephew, Bobby Dassey. Steven claimed that he had spoken to Teresa when she came to take pictures, and then she left. In addition to the bone fragments, the SUV keys, and the blood found in the car, a bullet with Teresa's DNA was discovered in the garage. While in jail, Steven's younger nephew, Brendan Dassey, was also questioned about the murder. Brendan, who was 16 years old at the time, was questioned by police without his parents or lawyer accompany. He confessed to investigators that first he and Steven assaulted Teresa and then murdered her. They burned her body to destroy the evidence. Brendan was charged in March 2006 as an accessory to the murder. He later recanted his confession, claiming he was coerced by detectives. Brendan was charged with the same crimes as Steven, even though there was no physical evidence linking him to the crime scene. Steven was convicted in March 2007 and sentenced to life in prison without parole. Later that year, Brendan was also found guilty and given a life sentence, with the possibility of parole in 2048. This murder case did not have a clear solution and caused much controversy after the conviction. A petition urging the White House to pardon Steven and Brendan collected over 128,000 signatures but ultimately had no effect. The White House clarified that, since the convictions occurred in a state court, the president lacks the authority to issue pardons. Many people, including Steven and Brendan's families, believe in their innocence and hope the real killer of Teresa will be found. Steven's ex-fiancée, Sandy Greenman, also believed that he is innocent. She started a Facebook page to raise awareness about the case, describing him as a model man. She expressed frustration that people wrongly portray Steven as perpetually violent, but which is not true. Most notable, however, is the support of Kim Kardashian. As a socialite, she used her position to help Case get a fair trial. After learning about the case through social media, she became interested. Despite her attempts to appeal to the governor, also has no effect. However, she remains determined to seek justice for both Steven and Brendan. On the other hand, some people believe that Steven is the suspect, including Jody Stachowski, another ex-fiancée of his. Initially, Jody supported Steven's innocence. Later, she confessed that she lied and it was all an act. In an interview with Nancy Grace, Jody claimed that Steven had threatened to kill her, her family, and a friend. She alleged that he wanted revenge on women after he was wrongfully convicted in Penny's case. She stated that Steven was the one person she couldn't trust and that he was a monster. To avoid a conflict of interest, Manitowoc County handed over the case to neighboring Calumet County. However, as part of the agreement, Calumet County was allowed to utilize Manitowoc County's resources, including personnel. A Manitowoc County Sheriff's deputy found a key in Steven's room after multiple searches. The defense team alleged that the blood evidence discovered in the car was actually taken from a vial containing Steven's blood from a prior conviction. They claimed that the blood vial had been tampered with, citing a visible puncture hole on the stopper. However, the prosecution disputed this claim by testing the blood for a preservative typically found in stored blood samples, but not in fresh human blood. The test results showed no presence of the preservative. Steven's defense team presented an expert witness who testified that a negative test result for the preservative did not mean it was absent, as the testing technology itself might be inconclusive. Brendan Dassey, who was 16 years old at the time, he was interviewed without a lawyer or parent present. Notably, Brendan had an IQ of 73, indicating intellectual disability, which may have made him more vulnerable to suggestion during questioning. Police used the read technique, a method that has been criticized as coercive, raising concerns about the reliability of Brendan's testimony. The Reed technique has faced criticism for leading to a high number of false confessions, particularly among juveniles and individuals with mental impairments. This method aims to make suspects feel comfortable with their interrogators, ultimately encouraging them to confess. During the interrogation process, suspects are presented with evidence that proves their guilt. In Brendan's case, he initially agreed with the interrogators but later retracted his confession. He claimed that his initial defense team worked with the prosecution to coerce a confession from him, which he later denied. Steven and Brendan have repeatedly appealed their convictions, but have been denied each time and remain in prison. Their defense teams have made extensive efforts to secure retrials, but so far have been unsuccessful. However, Brendan is now being represented by Professors Laura Nyroder and Stephen Drizin from the Northwestern University Center on Wrongful Convictions of Youth. Despite encountering numerous obstacles, they continue to pursue appeals on his behalf. Steven Avery's decision to hire Kathleen Zellner as his lawyer has greatly affected his case. It has raised concerns about the accuracy of the prosecution's claims. His previous lawyers, Dean Strang and Jerry Buting, have leveraged their newfound fame to promote the case and raise awareness about Steven. Kathleen Zellner, a highly accomplished trial lawyer, has successfully overturned 19 wrongful convictions. Her meticulous approach and relentless pursuit of justice resulted in the discovery of crucial missing evidence, helping to exonerate her client. Kathleen quickly got to work after being appointed to Steven's defense team, and she believes in her client's innocence. One of the first things she wanted to clear up was the confession of Joseph Evans Jr., a Wisconsin inmate serving a life sentence for killing his wife. He claimed that he was also behind Teresa's death and trying to frame Steven. However, Kathleen rejected Joseph's claim, viewing it as a blatant attempt to gain attention. Joseph had previously sought attention by writing a lengthy letter to the media, said that he had overheard Steven confessing to the crime. This time, Joseph was probably motivated by the prospect of getting some bonus money, which he could use to improve his life in prison. As a result, his claim is not being considered credible. In August 2016, Kathleen filed a motion requesting new scientific testing, offering to pay for it herself. Her goal was to gather evidence to prove that Steven was wrongly accused. The testing aimed to analyze 3 separate burn pits, which allegedly contained human remains. A notable discovery was a human pelvic bone fragment, which had been previously given to the family Teresa as part of her remains. Kathleen argued that this bone was planted in Steven's burn pit. However, the defense team was not allowed to test the bone, as it was not disclosed to them, which Kathleen considered a Brady violation. This meant that potentially exonerating evidence was not properly disclosed. Kathleen remains dogged in her pursuit of justice. She approaches the case from a different angle, one that may help point to a new suspect in the case. Since the bone fragments couldn't be tested, she decided to conduct forensic testing on the Dassey family computer. What she found was disgusting. The computer contained pornographic, depicts women in various stages of torture, including violent images and videos showing women as victims. These images were reportedly accessed when Bobby Dassey was at home. Kathleen also discovered that Bobby's family members, including his mother Barbara, Steven's sister, and her husband Scott Tadich, were allegedly attempting to destroy evidence that could incriminate Bobby. The forensic team successfully extracted 2,449 pages of data from the computer, including all of Bobby's searches, videos, and photos, which were saved to a CD-ROM and submitted as part of the motion for a retrial. Bobby is Brendan's older brother and Steven's nephew. He played a crucial role as the prosecution's key eyewitness in Steven's trial. According to Bobby, he last saw Teresa heading to his uncle's house, but when he returned from hunting that afternoon, both Teresa and her car were gone. Additionally, Bobby's half-brother, Brad Dassey, has made some claims that have added to the complexity of the case. Brad believes that Steven is innocent. Furthermore, he has stated that his stepmother, Barbara, and Scott, Steven's brother-in-law, deleted all the pornographic material from the computer. It is also reported that Barbara has filed a harassment lawsuit against Brad following a conversation they had about recovering deleted files from a computer. Some people think that this lawsuit is partly intended to keep Brad quiet about what he knows. A crucial piece of evidence may ultimately seal Bobby's fate. At the same time, it can exonerate Steven and Brendan. An eyewitness named Thomas Sowinski has come forward with a sworn statement claiming he saw Bobby, accompanied by an older man, pushing Teresa's SUV into the salvage yard. Thomas was driving by while delivering newspapers and passed by the pair twice. The second time, Bobby allegedly stepped in front of Thomas's car, forcing him to swerve to avoid a collision. Thomas continued on his delivery route, but noticed Bobby seemed unhappy to see him. After the SUV was discovered, Thomas realized the importance of what he had seen and contacted the police. However, when he shared his account, police dismissed him, said they knew who the suspect was, and he never heard from them again. For Kathleen, this presents a clear contradiction to the prosecution's main witness. If proven, which she is confident will happen, Bobby's testimony would be discredited. Kathleen argues that the exclusion of crucial evidence supporting Steven's case denied him a fair opportunity to prove his innocence years ago. A newly filed appeal is currently under review by the court, with a decision expected in November 2022. Steven Avery maintains his innocence. Kathleen emphasizes that she represents those wrongly convicted and warns that she will discover any deception. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Kimberly Antonakis. Kimberly Antonakis was born in 1974 in New York, USA. She was the only child in the family. Despite the fact that she grew up in love and affluence, she was not pampered. Her parents came from simple families. Nevertheless, her father Thomas managed to achieve considerable heights. He created his own company, which was engaged in computers, earned funds. The man was happy to spend on his favorite daughter and her desires. When Kimberly was a little girl, her parents divorced. The child was left to live with her mother. However, this did not weaken the connection between the little girl and her father. He took her on weekends and spent all his free time with her. When Kimberly's mother found a new man and decided to move to Florida, she faced a choice to stay with her mother or with her father. Since she didn't want to move, the young lady decided to live with her father. Kimberly was very close to her father and enjoyed living with him. As she grew up, she became a well-behaved, sociable child and eventually a stunning young woman with a radiant smile that always lifted her spirits. She had a great sense of humor and a positive attitude. Kimberly was raised in a sheltered environment, surrounded by love and care, which protected her from the harsh realities of life. As a result, she only saw the good in people and was largely unaware of the darker aspects of life. Unfortunately, her open and kind nature would eventually lead to many sorrows. In 1994, Kimberly enrolled at the College of Staten Island. Shortly after, she told her father that she felt ready to live on her own. Although Mr. Kimberly was worried about her decision, he respected her independence and decided not to oppose it. He promised himself that he would do his best to ensure her safety and well-being in her new living arrangements. Kimberly bought a nice apartment for his daughter, located in a wealthy area of the city, and installed an alarm system to ensure her safety. He also purchased a parking space in the garage across the street so she wouldn't have to park far away. To stay in touch, he provided her with a cell phone and a pager. Kimberly did everything in his power to ensure his daughter's well-being. His concerns for her safety were well-founded, given his wealth and her limited life experience. Kimberly was a diligent student who also worked part-time as an accountant at a reputable firm. She had declined her father's offer to join the family business, opting instead to forge her own path. Kimberly led a typical student life, attending parties and socializing with friends. She declined her father's offers to return home, wanting to maintain independence. This led to an unexpected situation when she let friend Liz Pace and her family stay while their apartment was being renovated in early 1995. Kimberly, with a kind heart, invited young people to her lodging. They spent days having fun together. One day, Kimberly and a friend attended a party, getting ready and dressing up. After a fun night of dancing, Kimberly drove them home but didn't go up, citing unfinished business. They hugged goodbye, unaware they'd never see each other again. After visiting the police, Mr. Kimberly's father, went to the parking lot next to her house, only to find that her car was missing from the garage. As he looked around, he spotted a shiny object on the floor near the wall, a small gold earring. He recalled giving his daughter similar earrings and, just in case, picked it up. However, Kimberly was nowhere to be found in the apartment. Instead, he met her guests, including a friend, her boyfriend Joshua Torres, and their 2-year-old child. Although Kimberly was aware of Kimberly's decision, he didn't agree with it. The tenants were worried about the hostess's absence and Joshua offered to help find her. He said he was looking for Kimberly and would assist later. Kimberly returned to the police station, explaining that his daughter had been in an accident, but the officers remained unconvinced. Kimberly decided to speak with Liz Pace, the last person to see Kimberly, and showed her the jewelry he had found. Liz Pace confirmed that she had seen Kimberly wearing those earrings on the night she disappeared. Kimberly then visited the places his daughter frequently went to, talking to many people, but didn't gather any significant information. Joshua suggested searching not only for Kimberly but also for her distinctive car. Kimberly went to the police station for the 3rd time, insisting that he wouldn't leave until they began a search. A detective eventually responded to his appeal, agreeing to take on the investigation despite the usual protocol. To better understand the events surrounding Kimberly Antonakis' disappearance, investigators started by reconstructing her activities on February 28. Kimberly began the day by attending college, followed by a few hours of work. After work, she returned home and had dinner with friends before heading out to a party with a friend named Liz Pace. The evening concluded with their return home around 4 a.m. Following her return, Kimberly went to the parking lot for reasons that remain unclear. Both her apartment and garage were thoroughly searched, but no signs of struggle or foreign fingerprints were found. This lack of evidence suggested either a meticulous cleanup or that any potential intruder may have worn gloves. The most puzzling aspect was the disappearance of Kimberly and her car without any trace, except for a single earring that was found. An analysis of Kimberly's bank account revealed that her last transaction occurred the evening before she vanished, ruling out the possibility that she had run away from home. Based on the evidence, detectives hypothesized that Kimberly was likely kidnapped. The investigation expanded to include additional police officers. Due to the lack of concrete leads, law enforcement considered information from a psychic. Witness interviews began with Liz Pace and Joshua. They revealed 65 calls were made from Kimberly's landline on March 1st. Joshua explained he made these calls to locate Kimberly, who was like a little sister to him. Liz Pace's testimony helped determine Kimberly's clothing and a portrait was created, highlighting her distinctive tattoos, including a scorpion and infinity sign. Meanwhile, a search for the missing car was underway, with checks at scrap metal collection points and other locations where the vehicle might be found. Unfortunately, no positive results were obtained. A check of Kimberly's cell phone was also unsuccessful. Police advised Kimberly to pay attention to any letters or phone calls he received, as they might be from Kimberly's kidnappers demanding a ransom. The Kimberly family remained in a state of uncertainty until March 4th. At approximately 2 a.m., emergency services responded to a reported fire at a large, abandoned house located at 86 Woodhaven Avenue in Queens. Multiple fire crews battled the blaze until it was finally extinguished. Upon investigation, a charred body was discovered in the basement of the building. Further analysis by forensic experts revealed the deceased was a woman between 20 to 25 years old, with remnants of long, black hair still intact. There were also signs of tape and evidence that her legs had been bound, with her hands tied behind her back. The most disturbing aspect, however, was that she was alive at the time of the fire, as indicated by the presence of smoke in her lungs. Detectives initially suspected that the body might belong to Kimberly, a missing person. To confirm the identity, dental records were required. Meanwhile, an inspection of the ashes and the air revealed the scent of gasoline, strongly suggesting that the fire had been intentionally set to destroy evidence of a serious crime. Despite the absence of other evidence, the charred body remained, and upon closer examination, specialists found tattoos matching the description of the missing woman. The records from the dental clinic supported the investigation's suspicions, leading to the discovery of Kimberly Antonakis's body. As more details emerged, an eyewitness came forward who often walked his dog in the area. The dog had been acting strangely in the days prior to the fire, appearing nervous and barking at the house for no apparent reason. It wasn't until after the fire and the discovery of the body that the cause of the dog's behavior became clear. She had attempted to escape and called for help, but her cries went unheard by humans. However, the dog's acute hearing allowed it to detect the sounds coming from the basement, explaining its unusual behavior. When questioned by officers, the homeowner revealed that he had visited the building multiple times in recent days. He was trying to sell the house and would regularly check on its condition, collect mail, and pick up receipts. However, he only inspected the house from the outside and never went into the basement. The homeowner claimed he never heard any suspicious noises, and if he had, he would have investigated. Investigators decided to re-question Joshua, as they had some reservations about him. They also found it strangely coincidental that his name started with the letter J. This time, Joshua mentioned a person he hadn't been able to contact the day Kimberly went missing, a young man nicknamed Psycho, a Russian national who had previously dated Kimberly. The detectives looked into this new information and discovered that the Russian had moved to the US with his parents at a young age. As he grew older, he became involved with a gang and had a history of breaking the law. This led to the identification of the first suspect, who was soon taken into custody. During interrogation, Psycho was informed of his former lover's death, but his reaction shocked the detectives. The young man not only denied involvement in the crime, but he also showed genuine emotional distress. Investigators took him to the crime scene to observe his behavior, and it became clear to everyone that they had the wrong person in custody. Later, his alibi was confirmed, leaving the investigation at a standstill once again. The victim's family sought the psychic's help again. This time, she claimed to have seen 4 people involved in the crime. According to her, the kidnappers had initially intended to establish communication but failed. The kidnapping didn't seem to have been planned with a tragic outcome. The psychic concluded that new information would emerge soon. A couple of days later, Mr. Kimberly, hoping to gather some leads, announced a $10,000 reward for information that could help catch the perpetrator. Mr. Kimberly couldn't shake off the psychic's words. He pondered the psychic's statement about the kidnappers wanting to make contact. What could that mean, and what had prevented them from doing so? Upon returning home, he sat at the table and stared at his phone for a while. He suddenly recalled a minor detail from the day Kimberly went missing. He had listened to all the answering machine recordings as he had been expecting his girl to contact him. However, there were no messages, except for 2 blank ones with complete silence. He initially thought it was a technical issue or a problem with the connection. But it later became clear that this was not the case. 5 days after her body was found, the police located her car in a quiet area of town, not far from where her body was discovered. The investigators were hoping to find fingerprints in the car, but it had been thoroughly cleaned. The only evidence they found was her hair and a second earring in the passenger compartment. Although it seemed like a breakthrough, it didn't lead anywhere. Kimberly, her father, was linked to a local mob hit due to his wealth and success. However, detectives found no evidence to support the rumors. Kimberly, grieving the loss of his daughter, denied any involvement and was found to conduct his business openly and honestly. In July 1995, a burglary suspect was arrested at a New York City residence. Surprisingly, he shared information about the Kimberly case. The suspect claimed an acquaintance told him that his friends had kidnapped and killed she by burning her. Upon hearing the unidentified man's name, the officers pieced together the crime. The man in question was Joshua Torres, Kimberly's roommate who had participated in the search for her. Detectives took a closer look at the young man, calling him in for further questioning. Although he denied any involvement in the crime, a lengthy conversation revealed a potentially incriminating statement. He mentioned that if he were the kidnapper, he would have fed the victim Kimberly. This statement raised suspicions since there had been no public mention of the victim's hunger, thirst, or cold, and not even her father was aware of these details. To strengthen their case, investigators examined the suspect's past, finding a criminal record and a pattern of obsessive behavior. He was jobless and financially dependent on his roommate, caring for her child, which gave him unmonitored time to plan the crime. Knowing Kimberly's daily routine allowed him to abduct her and hide her in a vacant house. It was unclear why no ransom demands were made. Analyzing the suspect's calls revealed he lied about contacting Kimberly's acquaintances. The dialed numbers belonged to random individuals with no connection to Kimberly. Suspicious messages on his pager further implicated the suspect, Joshua. He had long been a suspect in the eyes of detectives, and they finally gathered enough evidence to arrest him. During the interrogation, they informed him that Kimberly's ex-boyfriend was no longer considered a suspect. Pressed for more information, Torres revealed that he suspected his friends of being responsible for her murder. Torres claimed that he thought his friends only intended to kidnap Kimberly for ransom and then release her unharmed. He admitted to being an accessory to the kidnapping but maintained that he did not think his friends would resort to violence. According to Torres, the plan was to demand a ransom and then let Kimberly go, but things did not go as planned. The kidnappers became frustrated when their ransom demands were met with silence from Mr. Kimberly. Unbeknownst to them, their calls had been answered by Kimberly's father, and a ransom message had even been recorded. However, due to a technical issue, the recording was not saved on the answering machine. The kidnappers, feeling ignored and angered by the lack of response, decided to wait and see how events would unfold. It turns out the group feared public attention, and the psychics claim that the suspect's name began with the letter J. This information was published and broadcast on TV, creating a cycle of events. Joshua was released on bail after speaking with the police, but then disappeared. Around the same time, Jose was shot while walking with his wife. Jose's wife later told investigators that her husband didn't trust Joshua and had been gathering evidence against him. She claimed Jose felt guilty about kidnapping Kimberly but not about the house fire. He wanted to confess to the police, just as he had to her. The pager messages and suspect statements helped investigators piece together the kidnapping and crime details. 4 men were involved: Joshua, Julio Negrin, Jose Negrin, and Nicholas Brett, also known as Jay. Notably, Julio had previously dated Kimberly and proposed, but she rejected him. The group was united by friendship and a shared criminal past. However, their actions were far surpassed by the horrific treatment of she at the hands of the guys. Nicholas had recently been released on bail, thanks to his mother's intervention, and had received a lenient fine for a crime that could have resulted in a prison sentence of over a year. Joshua had a history of serious offenses, including child abduction, violence against a minor, and illegal possession of weapons, despite his young age. Nevertheless, he too had received an inappropriately light sentence for his crimes. It was evident that Joshua was the ringleader, responsible for coordinating the group's actions. After Kimberly left the party, the men seized her in the parking lot, having apparently been stalking her and waiting for the ideal moment to strike when she was alone. A gun was used to intimidate Kimberly. When she resisted, the perpetrators tied her hands and covered her mouth, eyes, and ears with duct tape. They then put her in the trunk of a car and drove her to an abandoned house, where she was taken to the basement and tied to a chair. To prevent her from making noise, they removed her shoes. The kidnappers told Kimberly that her father owed them money and that she would be released once he paid the debt. Julio was tasked with caring for Kimberly, bringing her food and water twice a day, and keeping her warm. However, fearing the consequences, Julio abandoned the house, leaving Kimberly without food, water, or warmth for 3 days. Once Julio left, the kidnappers informed Joshua, who made an audio recording demanding a ransom of $775,000. Then, the kidnapper called Kimberly's father, leaving 2 empty messages. The kidnappers waited for a response, genuinely confused as to why Kimberly's father didn't contact them. Meanwhile, Kimberly, left unattended, suffered from dehydration, passing out multiple times, yet continued to fight for her life. The kidnappers grew angry and fearful of being caught due to the lack of ransom payment, so they decided to release Kimberly. Upon entering the basement, they found her unconscious and assumed she was dead. To eliminate evidence in the hostage, they planned to get rid of her. During the investigation, officers learned from Liz Pace that Joshua used his roommate as an alibi, directing his accomplices while staying at home with his child. Liz Pace initially claimed she was unaware of Joshua's involvement in Kimberly's kidnapping. However, at the trial, she testified against him. She stated that after being interrogated, Joshua approached her and confessed to all his crimes. However, he then turned violent, physically assaulting her, silencing her, and issuing death threats before fleeing. Some time later, Joshua was apprehended by law enforcement. In an effort to further the investigation, the authorities decided to bring the former friends together, informing them that Joshua had denied any involvement in the massacre. Upon learning of Joshua's denial, Julio chose to cooperate with the investigation, revealing crucial information. This cooperation played a pivotal role in securing Torres' conviction for Kimberly's murder. Ultimately, the trio faced charges of murder, arson, kidnapping, and unlawful imprisonment. During the trial, evidence emerged that Joshua had made repeated attempts to deceive investigators and evade punishment. After deliberating for approximately 10 hours, the jury reached a verdict. Joshua Torres was sentenced to 58 years in prison. Nicholas Brett received the same sentence as the others. Julio Negrin was found guilty of being an accessory after the fact and was sentenced to 2 to 6 years in prison. Tomas Kimberly, the victim's family member, was satisfied with the court's verdict and did not want the perpetrators to receive the death penalty. In his opinion, the death penalty would have been too lenient a punishment. Nicholas Brett was repeatedly abused and assaulted in prison and died of AIDS after serving 2 years. Julio Negrin was released after serving his 2-year sentence. Joshua will not be eligible for release until 2053 at the earliest. Tragically, sadly, Kimberly's father, Kimberly, passed away from cancer in 2005. His family believes that the stress and grief caused by his daughter's death contributed to his illness. The life of Kimberly Antonakis, a beautiful young girl, was cut short in a shocking and devastating manner. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Christina and Thompson Harris. Christina and Thompson and Jason Thomas Harris, both 40, had been married for 11 years by 2014. They got married in 2003, after dating for about 5 years. In 2009, Christina and Jason welcomed their first child, which brought significant changes to their lives. Despite the daily challenges and responsibilities, they were happy to be parents. Christina took care of the house and the children, while Jason worked at a plastics factory. As the children grew up, Christina was able to contribute financially to the family by working. However, in May 2014, she had to take maternity leave because she was expecting their second child in a few weeks. On September 29, 2014, Jason chatted with Christina while at work. Christina was suffering from a cold. She had a bad cough and was not sleeping well, but she reassured her husband that she was fine. A few hours later, Jason called his wife at home but received no response, which worried him. Unable to reach Christina, Jason asked a neighbor to check on her. He explained that Christina was sick and not answering the phone. The neighbor knocked on the front door but got no answer, so she called Christina's name. Receiving no response, she decided to try the door, found it unlocked, and entered the house. When she entered the bedroom, she found Christina lying on the bed and could not wake her. The neighbor called 911 and ran out of the house to call another neighbor, a nurse. The nurse checked Christina's pulse and confirmed that she had died. Thus, on September 29, 2014, 4 months after the birth of her second child, Christina was found dead at home. When the police arrived, Jason Harris was present. He told the police and paramedics that his wife had been sick but was alive when he left for work that morning. 2 days later, the medical examiner ruled that Christina died from an overdose of a controlled substance, a finding that shocked her family and friends. Most people who knew Christina, a mother of 2, including a newborn, believed that she had never used drugs. Christina's mother, Kathy, told police that her daughter was fine when she saw her the day before she died. Police were therefore skeptical of Jason Harris's claim that his wife had a cold. According to Kathy, Christina said her marriage to Jason was complicated. Jason was unhappy with the marriage but did not want a divorce because of concerns about child support and custody. Neighbors who discovered Christina's body also provided additional information to the police. Jason reportedly told them that the night before Christina died, he had prepared cereal with milk for her, then Christina passed out and dropped the plate. Police realized that Christina's family and friends had a hard time accepting that she might be involved in drugs. Instead, police suspected that Jason Harris was involved in Christina's death. Christina's mother and sisters insisted that police test her breast milk. According to Kathy, the police ignored the request for 48 hours. However, thanks to the family's persistence, the police finally agreed to investigate. As a result, breast milk was used as evidence for the first time in Michigan history. As confirmed by Christina's family and friends, all drug tests at her workplace and at the hospital where she gave birth to her second child were negative. Her second child was only 4 months old when Christina died. Christina was breastfeeding, and Kathy confirmed that Christina was very careful about what she put into her body because she didn't want to affect her child. Christina often pumped breast milk while at work and stored it in the freezer. Some of the breast milk was left at Kathy's mother's house. They tested 3 bags of breast milk for possible drug residue. These bags were labeled with the date they were put in the freezer so Christina knew which bag to thaw first. Experts tested all the samples, including the ones frozen just before Christina died, and found no signs of drugs. This proves that Christina did not use the substance that killed her. Jason Harris's sister was the only one who suggested that Christina had used drugs, prompting investigators to focus more on Jason and treat Christina's death as a homicide. The investigation was slow, and it is unclear what would have happened if Christina's family had not been actively involved in the search for the truth. Kathy repeatedly reminded Davison police about her daughter's case in August 2016, nearly 2 years after Christina's death. Not seeing the enthusiasm and desire to solve her daughter's case in Davison, Kathy asked Davison police to turn the case over to the Michigan State Police, which had new investigators. From there, the story began to unravel. Police gathered a lot of information about Jason Harris, including how he acted before and after his wife's death. Jason had been having affairs with other women. Christina knew about this and confided in her family and co-workers that Jason had been texting other people while she was giving birth to their youngest child. Christina once told a co-worker that if she died, Jason would be the cause. When asked if she was serious, she said yes. Jason told his co-worker that he suspected the second child was not his biological child. He also complained that after the birth, Christina became depressed, often stayed in bed, and did not go to work. Jason often complained about Christina nagging him. A co-worker of Jason recalled that Jason may have told him that he wanted Christina dead. He described the relationship between Jason and Christina as toxic and recalled that they argued frequently. One of the most surprising and shocking things about this case is that Jason Harris did not hesitate to let everyone know that he wanted to get rid of his wife. He tried to do so, but unfortunately, no one paid attention to his words and actions before Christina died. Jason bought poison twice and mixed it into her drink. Both times, Christina felt that the taste was unusual and did not drink it. Jason then asked a co-worker to find him a poison that would not change the taste or smell of drinks or food. Jason said he wanted to knock Christina unconscious so she would not feel anything. When he shared with the co-worker that Christina would not drink water because it tasted strange, the co-worker refused to talk to him further. The co-worker testified that Jason had talked about wanting Christina to stop nagging and that the co-worker thought Jason was joking. Jason also told a co-worker that he had hired someone to kill Christina, but the person was arrested for another reason before the murder. Jason therefore offered the co-worker $10,000 from Christina's $100,000 life insurance policy to kill her. The co-worker refused the offer, thinking that Jason was just venting his anger by talking about his wife and making inappropriate jokes. According to the colleague, he recalled a conversation with Jason in which Jason said, "I'm bored with her. I'm going to dump her." The police then decided to question the neighbor who discovered Christina's body. The neighbor testified that she saw Christina's family truck in the driveway. But Christina did not come to the door. She entered the house and found Christina lying in bed, unresponsive. The neighbor asked Jason if she should try to wake her up. He replied that Christina must have fallen asleep and that he would come home. The neighbor went back inside and removed the covers around Christina because she felt cold and had foam coming from her mouth and nose. The neighbor called 911 and another neighbor who was a registered nurse. The neighbor, who was a registered nurse, testified that Christina was cold, stiff, had no pulse, and had white foam coming from her mouth. She did not attempt to resuscitate Christina because she believed she was already dead. Jason told the police that he asked a neighbor to check on Christina and that he had to rush home because Christina was unresponsive. However, witnesses said Jason did not appear anxious or in a hurry. What raised suspicions about Jason was that morning, he called Christina's supervisor at work. He told her that Christina had died the night before and that he wanted to inquire about the $100,000 death benefit from Christina's life insurance policy through work. Additionally, one of the women Jason had an intimate relationship with told investigators that Jason had contacted her on the day of Christina's death and said that his wife had died from an overdose of a controlled substance. This suggests that he knew what caused Christina's death even before the medical examiner's report. That evening, the neighbor he had asked to check on Christina saw him in his driveway. She said that Jason told her that Christina was not the angel her parents thought she was and that their child would soon learn all the good and bad things about Christina. He said that Christina dropped her bowl of cereal, and he told her to go to bed. Jason also told a neighbor that his wife tossed and turned during the night and that he heard her coughing before he left for work. Jason wondered if that was her last breath. Jason told a police officer that Christina was coughing a lot when he left the house. He also told the police that Christina fell asleep eating cereal the night before she died. Finally, Jason told Christina's mother, Kathy, that before she died, Christina complained that her water tasted like chemicals. One of the main motives in this case is believed to be insurance money. Within a week of Christina's death, Jason and his mother went to Christina's workplace to inquire about the life insurance money. Additionally, Jason received a $20,000 death benefit from a life insurance policy issued by his company shortly after Christina's death. One of Jason's lovers moved in with Jason and his children. Christina's mother believed that Jason's lover moved in with him after Christina's funeral. However, Jason's neighbor testified that the lover had even moved into Jason's home before Christina's funeral. The neighbor added that Jason's adult children from a previous marriage moved into the home within days of Christina's death. Police also discovered that Jason Harris purchased a plane ticket to Rhode Island 9 days after Christina's death to visit a woman with whom he had exchanged more than 5,800 text messages. County Medical Examiner Dr. Brian Hunter submitted post-mortem blood and urine samples for laboratory testing. Dr. Hunter determined that the test results were consistent with Christina being poisoned by a lethal substance. Initially, Dr. Hunter determined that her death was an accident. Because there were no injection marks on Christina's body and investigators did not find any powder residue or rolling papers next to the bed where Christina died. In 2016, the Michigan State Police took over the investigation into Christina's death. In 2019, after Christina's family disputed Christina's cause of death, Dr. Hunter later changed Christina's death certificate from an accident to a homicide. Police charged Jason with first-degree murder, solicitation of murder, and delivery of a controlled substance resulting in death. He was denied bail. Jason's attorney, Nicholas Robinson, said his client pleaded not guilty to the charges and wanted to fight them. When he was arrested, Jason had lost his job after testing positive for drugs. Kathy's efforts to ensure that law enforcement would punish the person responsible for her daughter's death were not overlooked. Gena's County Prosecutor David Layton said that a few years ago, he began receiving Facebook messages and emails from a Davidson woman who claimed her daughter had died and that her death was not an accident. "It can't be happening," the woman told the prosecutor. She was certain that someone had caused her daughter's death. Kathy's passionate pleas caught David Layton's attention, prompting authorities to re-examine the death of her daughter, Christina. "I will never forget what she wrote in an email, Prosecutor, you are my last hope. This is our last chance to get justice for my daughter. Please help me," David Layton said. "At that moment and as I spoke to her this morning, I was absolutely convinced that her daughter's death was not an accident. It was the result of foul play. It was Kathy's relentless efforts to seek justice for her daughter's death that led to this situation. And those efforts paid off." The trial began in 2020. The prosecution alleged that Jason put a controlled substance in his wife's cereal bowl to kill her. He then went to work as usual, waited a few hours, and asked a neighbor to check on Christina. According to the prosecution, Jason wanted someone else to discover his wife's body in order to reduce suspicion against him. The direct evidence against Jason was overwhelming. Jason had a motive for killing Christina. He was having an affair with another woman, suspected she was cheating on him, believed the second child was not his, and was tired of her nagging. Jason did not want a divorce because he did not want to pay child support or lose custody of her. Before her death, Jason told a coworker that he wanted Christina dead. On the morning of her death, Jason called her company to inquire about a $100,000 life insurance policy, and in that call, he said Christina had died the night before. The jury heard clear evidence that Jason not only wanted Christina dead, but that he had tried to hire someone to kill her. He planned to do this and knew where to buy illegal drugs. In fact, he had purchased them on multiple occasions to give to Christina. At trial, multiple witnesses testified that Christina did not use drugs recreationally. Christina was very careful about what she consumed because she was breastfeeding. Furthermore, tests showed that her frozen breast milk contained no harmful substances. To support the theory that Jason had poisoned Christina's food, the prosecution presented toxicology reports. For example, Dr. Judge argued that Christina's death could have been caused by ingestion of some kind of poison. The prosecution ruled out injection because no traces of injection or needles were found at the scene. Dr. Judge also testified that inhalation was unlikely because no rolled-up dollar bills or snorting paper were found at the scene. The court gave Jason Harris a chance to speak, but he did not apologize or show remorse. Instead, he insisted that he was innocent. The judge said, "The jury did not believe your lies," ultimately exposing him as a selfish and deceitful murderer. On November 17, 2021, the jury found Jason Harris, 47, guilty on all charges. 3 weeks later, the court sentenced him to life in prison without parole. He has appealed the verdict, however. After the trial, prosecutor David Layton expressed his condolences to Christina's family and friends, emphasizing that this was a tragic case. Layton went on to say, "While this case has many unique and media-driven details, the most important thing is the family's loss. I hope this verdict helps them find comfort in knowing that justice has been served." Jason requested a new trial on the grounds that his defense attorney did not do a good job. He introduced evidence in the form of his attorney's testimony, showing that his defense attorney failed to seek an independent expert opinion on the prosecution's evidence and failed to consult with an independent toxicologist. Jason's defense attorney explained this decision as part of a trial strategy because he had thoroughly questioned Dr. Hunter and was able to show the jury that Dr. Hunter had changed his opinion about the cause of death based on information from a related civil lawsuit. In February 2024, the Michigan Court of Appeals upheld Jason Harris's conviction. He remains in prison for life without the possibility of parole. Hi there, investigators. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case. The case of Candy Rogers. Candace Rogers, also known as Candy, was born on July 18, 1949, in Spokane, Washington. She was an only child in her family, and soon after she was born, her parents divorced. Despite this, Candy maintained a close relationship with her father. Her father lived in the same city, so she got to see him frequently. Candy was a bright and cheerful child who loved spending time outdoors with friends, exploring nature, and playing with her dog. She had a strong desire to join the Campfire Girls, a well-known organization that provided girls with opportunities to learn new skills, go on hikes, and form lasting friendships. In 1959, at the age of 9, Candy finally got the chance to join the Campfire Girls, and she was overjoyed. As a member of Campfire Girls, one of her responsibilities was to sell mints door-to-door in her neighborhood. The organization provided her with boxes of sweets to sell. On Friday, March 6th, Candy planned to sell mints after school. After returning home, having dinner, and playing with her dog, she packed 8 boxes of mints and set out around 4 p.m. Candy had a plan to go door-to-door in her neighborhood, offering sweets to her neighbors. To avoid duplicating efforts, she and the other girls in the area had assigned specific streets to visit. However, when Candy failed to return home by 6 p.m. as expected, her mom started to worry. As night began to fall, her mom and grandfather set out to search for her, scouring the neighborhood streets but finding no sign of Candy. Soon, some family friends and neighbors joined the search, but despite their combined efforts, no one could find any trace of Candy. At this point, her mom decided to call the police for assistance. By the time the police arrived, the streets were dark, and something might have happened to Candy. The police began their investigation by questioning the neighbors and soon discovered that Candy had only sold 1 box of mints, suggesting that something might have occurred shortly after she left her house. A resident reported suggesting that something might have occurred shortly after she left her house. A resident reported seeing a girl matching Candy's description on a nearby street around 6:30 p.m. This was unusual, as Candy's mother had already begun searching for her by that time. Candy's grandfather had a strange experience as well, which occurred when he searched for her on the very same street. He narrowly avoided being hit by a speeding green 1953 Ford, which struck the curb. Unfortunately, he couldn't see the license plate number. The police issued a detailed description of the vehicle and initiated a search, but so far they have not been able to locate it. Later, around 9 p.m., several mint boxes were found scattered along the road near a bridge. These boxes belonged to Candy, increasing concerns for her safety. The police focused their search in this area, thoroughly searching both riverbanks and a small wooded area on either side. Despite an all-night search, Candy was not found. By morning, news of her disappearance had spread through local newspapers. And soon the case was being covered by statewide media. In 1959, child disappearances near their homes were unusual because it happened extremely rarely. The townspeople were extremely worried about this. To resolve this alarming situation, police have stepped up search work. They added mounted police, all-terrain vehicles and helicopters and military personnel to thoroughly search the area. In addition, over 1,000 volunteers joined in the massive search from both local areas and nearby cities. It became one of the most extensive search operations at the time. Despite these efforts, they still could not locate Candy. Another incident that added to the trauma of the town was when a search helicopter struck power lines and crashed. As a result, 3 of its crew members died. However, police remained dedicated and relentless, operating 24/7 on this case. With so many investigations open, officers still tried everything. Throughout the case, nearly 750 initial leads turned up. Officers closely inspected every detail. Regrettably, these investigative trails did not help discover any definitive proof about Candy's. 2 weeks after Candy's disappearance, 2 military personnel from a local base went on a hunting trip in the woods west of Spokane. They stumbled upon children's shoes on the ground, which immediately reminded them of Candy's case. Since many military members had been involved in the search, they were familiar with the details of her disappearance. The military personnel reported their discovery to the police, who then showed the shoes to Candy's grandfather for identification. He confirmed that the shoes belonged to his granddaughter. The police quickly launched a search operation in the woods. Within minutes, an officer spotted a foot protruding from the bushes and discovered Candy's body. She was found lying in the underbrush, covered with pine branches. A medical examination revealed the cause of death was strangulation, also found marks on Candy's hands and feet, indicating that she had been bound. Although no ropes were found near the body. Furthermore, the medical experts concluded that Candy had been sexually abused. During the investigation, the police found a green car seat cover near the crime scene. Additionally, a small purple stain was discovered on Candy's clothing, which smelled like grape-flavored chewing gum. However, the police were unable to establish any connection between the stain and the crime. the police searched for any possible clues to find the killer. They examined incoming tips and investigated hundreds of individuals, including neighbors, suspicious characters, and previously convicted criminals. Their attention eventually turned to a 50-year-old man named Alfred Braves. Alfred became a suspect due to unusual circumstances. He took his own life on the same day Candy's body was discovered, in his car, near where the mint boxes were found. He also lived close to Candy's home. When police found Alfred's body, they discovered a rope and woman's hair pins in his car. After searching Alfred's house, police found numerous newspapers about sexual crimes against women and girls. They also learned that several women had accused him of harassment, and his wife suspected him of Candy's murder. However, investigators were unable to find any evidence directly linking Alfred to Candy's murder. Despite their reluctance, detectives had to eliminate him from the suspect list, as they did not have enough evidence to prove his guilt. As a result, they began investigating other suspects. Several months after the murder, the police had compiled an extensive list of suspects, but despite their diligent efforts, the investigation has made no new progress. Later, the investigators turned their attention to a new suspect, a serial killer named Hugh Morse. Hugh was arrested in 1961 for a string of crimes, and two factors made him a person of interest in Candy's case. Firstly, he was known for constantly chewing grape-flavored gum, which was similar to a substance found on Candy's clothing. Additionally, Hugh had killed two women in Spokane just a few months after Candy's death. Hugh's history of violence was also a concern. His first arrest was for assaulting a woman, but he received no serious consequences, merely being discharged from the army, where he was serving at the time. Hugh committed a string of robberies in Los Angeles, but only served 6 months in jail. After his release, he lured two 8-year-old girls to a secluded area with the promise of ice cream and then sexually assaulted them. Despite being arrested again, he managed to avoid prison time. A medical commission evaluated him and deemed him a sexual psychopath, leading to his placement in a mental health facility. 2 years later, doctors believed he was cured and released him from the facility. Hugh then moved to Spokane, where he began spying on women through their windows. In November 1959, Hugh broke into the home of a 28-year-old woman, assaulted her, and ultimately killed her. 10 months later, he entered the residence of a 69-year-old woman and repeated the same violent actions. A month after that, he attacked another woman, stabbing her multiple times, but she survived the assault. Hugh continued to travel from city to city, committing numerous crimes, including attacking women and girls with a knife, sexually assaulting them, and killing 2 more victims. His crimes eventually caught the attention of the FBI, and he was added to the list of the country's 10 most wanted criminals. He was eventually captured and sentenced to multiple life terms in prison. While serving his sentence, Hugh attempted to take his own life, but was saved by the prison guards and continued to serve out his sentence. Detectives investigating Candy's case visited him in prison multiple times, but he consistently denied any involvement in the crime. A polygraph test was also administered, which suggested he was telling the truth. However, lie detector test results are not considered reliable because their accuracy is only relative. Despite the lack of evidence, but investigators initially considered Hugh a primary suspect. Due to his background and the fact that he lived in Spokane at the time of the murder. However, he continued to deny any involvement and police were unable to find any evidence to prove his involvement in the crime. The investigation then shifted focus to another suspect, 49-year-old Howard Barnett. He was arrested in February 1960 on suspicion of molesting a minor girl. Before taking his own life in his cell at the Spokane police station, Barnett wrote a cryptic message in his own blood on the wall, stating, "I have a sin before the Lord." Detectives then began investigating Barnett's potential involvement in the crime, but they were once again unable to find any evidence of his guilt. Howard remained a primary suspect in the case due to his proximity to Candy's residence. Despite years of investigation, police continued to follow new leads and examine other potential suspects. A woman eventually came forward claiming to have seen a green car following Candy on the day she disappeared. Police refocused on locating the vehicle, but this lead ultimately yielded no results. It was notable that the woman waited many years to share this information. The case was reopened at various times, but each time investigators reached a dead end. Throughout the investigation, police not only had to pursue new leads but also had to verify the validity of confessions. 13 people gave false confessions to the crime. However, none of them were able to provide specific details that only the actual killer would have known. Instead, they often repeated details previously reported in the media. High-profile cases often exhibit unexpected and surprising behaviors, such as false confessions. In the case of Candy's murder, numerous detectives worked on the case over time, but none were able to solve it. This crime stood out as one of the most prominent and mysterious in the city and state. Before the murder, parents felt safe letting their children play outside, but the case led many to reconsider their views on safety. Years later, in the early 2000s, the case was reopened, and a new detective decided to use modern technologies to re-examine the evidence. Fortunately, the police had carefully collected and preserved the evidence in 1959, including a sample of male semen on Candy's clothing. Despite being stored for decades, experts were able to re-examine the sample, although it extremely challenging due to its age. After a lengthy investigation, experts finally extracted a DNA profile from the evidence and uploaded it to the FBI database. However, a search of the database yielded no matches. Further cross-examination of the profile with numerous suspect samples also proved unsuccessful. For many years, suspicion fell on Hugh Morse, but forensic evidence revealed no link between him and the crime. This lack of progress brought the investigation to a halt once again. Although the police had the killer's DNA, they struggled to identify the perpetrator. In 2021, a new detective reopened the case and decided to employ a new approach: genetic genealogy. This innovative method had already solved numerous cold cases and offered hope for finally resolving the standing mystery surrounding Candy's murder. The detective reached out to multiple labs that specialized in this type of analysis but was met with disappointment once again. To use this method, experts needed the original DNA sample, which was a challenge. Several labs attempted to work with the semen sample, but each concluded that it had degraded too much, making it impossible to extract the necessary information. The detective then consulted the final lab, which led to a long-awaited important discovery. With the help of state-of-the-art tools, the experts were able to successfully analyze the sample and obtain the perpetrator's DNA profile. This profile is then uploaded to a genealogy database to begin searching for the DNA owner's relatives. After a thorough investigation involving thousands of individuals, researchers pinpointed one family as the likely source of the DNA sample. They discovered that the DNA probably belonged to one of 3 brothers, all of whom had passed away. However, the team found that one brother had a daughter, and the police reached out to her for assistance. The daughter was shocked by the possibility that her father might be the killer, but she immediately agreed to help. She provided a DNA sample, proving that she was closely related to the person whose semen was found on Candy's clothing. With this new information, detectives obtained a court order to exhume her father's remains. A DNA profile extracted from the remains revealed a complete match with the DNA found on Candy's clothing, identifying the killer as John Hoff, 62 years after the crime. Hoff had never been a suspect despite hundreds of others being investigated over the years. Detectives investigating Hoff's biography uncovered his involvement in multiple crimes. At the time of Candy's murder, Hoff was 20 years old and lived close to her house, less than a mile away. He was also a soldier in the army, stationed at a nearby base where Candy's body was found. 2 years after the murder, Hoff attacked another woman, binding and sexually assaulting her before attempting to kill her. However, the woman survived the attack. Following his arrest, Hoff received a 6-month prison sentence and was dishonorably discharged from the army. After his release, Hoff started a family, having 2 sons and 2 daughters, and he living an ordinary life. He changed jobs several times and at one point, suffered a severe chemical burn to his face while working at a food packaging plant, leaving a scar to his face. Hoff's life ended in June 1970, 11 years after Candy's murder, when he took his own life without leaving a note. Further investigation revealed that Candy might have known Hoff, as she was friends with his 10-year-old sister at the time. Years later, Hoff's sister told detectives that she had cried in Hoff's arms after Candy's murder, unaware that he was the one responsible for Candy's death. Candy's parents did not live to see the day when the killer's identity was revealed. Her mother passed away in 2006, and her father had taken his own life in 1963, 4 years after the tragedy. The reason behind his death remains a mystery. There is speculation that he was unable to cope with the loss of his daughter. Despite this, the case was eventually solved, marking one of the longest investigations in history, spanning over 62 years and involving multiple detectives across different generations. At the press conference, where the killer's name was announced, only one officer who had worked on the case in 1959 was present. He expressed gratitude for having lived long enough to learn the truth. Hoff's daughter initially struggled to accept that her father had committed such a horrific crime. However, she eventually came to terms with the fact, referring to her father as a monster who took an innocent life. She expressed regret that he was not held accountable during his lifetime. A chilling coincidence is that Hoff took his own life when his daughter was 9 years old, the same age as Candy was when she was killed. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Timothy Jones Jr. Timothy Jones Jr. and Amber Kaiser, a divorced couple, had 5 children together, all under the age of 9. Mara Grace, Elias, Xavier, Nathalie, Gabrielle Asher, and Elaine Marie. The family lived in Lexington, South Carolina. When they first met as teenagers, Amber was attracted to Timothy's world and felt a strong connection to him and his way of life. They got married young, and while Timothy pursued his education in Mississippi, Amber dedicated herself to being a homemaker. Timothy grew up with a mother who struggled with schizophrenia, which gradually worsened over time. She eventually needed constant care. When Timothy's father was just 20 years old, he took Timothy to live with his grandmother. There, Timothy was exposed to a troubled environment marked by domestic violence, substance abuse, and alcoholism. Despite a tough upbringing, Timothy displayed a natural aptitude for numbers, effortlessly solving math problems, and disassembling and reassembling computers with ease. However, his life took a dramatic turn when he entered adolescence and began experiencing auditory hallucinations. At the age of 10, Timothy started using drugs and drinking excessively, and at 15, he suffered a traumatic brain injury in a car accident. This injury affected his frontal lobe, the area of the brain responsible for regulating impulses, which is also linked to psychopathic tendencies. Following the accident, Timothy's behavior became increasingly erratic and stubborn. He grew intensely jealous of his father, feeling threatened by anyone who had a relationship with him, believing they were taking away his father's attention. Over time, Timothy became convinced that his father didn't love him and harbored a deep-seated fear of abandonment. After completing high school, Timothy aspired to join the elite U.S. Navy SEALs, but he lacked the required athletic talent and discipline, leading to his eventual expulsion from the training program due to substance abuse. In 2001, Timothy Jones Jr. was sentenced to a year in a labor camp at an Illinois state prison. When he was released, he appeared to have undergone a significant transformation, with religion becoming a central guiding force in his life. At an amusement park in Chicago, he met Amber, the woman who would become the mother of his children, and they quickly decided to get married, in accordance with the rigid expectations of Timothy's Pentecostal church. At the time of their marriage, Amber was 19 years old, and Timothy was 22. Soon after, Amber became aware of the church's strict rules, which prohibited women from cutting their hair, wearing pants, makeup, or jewelry. Timothy believed in the principle that women should submit to their husbands and have many children. Timothy was a devout individual who dedicated his life to the church. Despite many people warning him against taking the Bible too literally, he remained committed to his faith. He and his spouse had 3 children in quick succession: Mara, Elias, and Nathan, each born a year apart. As their family grew, they relocated to Mississippi, where Timothy earned a degree in computer science and engineering from the state university with highest honors. Throughout this period, Timothy Jones Jr. successfully balanced his marital life, parenthood, and various jobs. His family was incredibly proud of him, recognizing Timothy as a remarkable genius with a bright future. Timothy's life seemed to be progressing smoothly. He secured a job at Intel as a computer chip manufacturer, which his wife Amber saw as a means to a better life. Having lived in student housing in Mississippi, they aspired to raise their 3 children in a larger house and even considered hiring a nanny. Timothy's dream of living on a farm led him to buy a rundown trailer on a dirt road in Red Bank. He purchased animals to raise, and Amber stayed at home to care for the kids and the animals. The problem was that Amber was isolated, with no car and no driving skills in this rural area. By 2012, they had 2 more children, and problems started to surface. Timothy questioned whether he was the father of their youngest daughter, Elaine. He also wanted Amber to homeschool the kids. Despite her limited education, she only finished high school. Amber, who already felt lonely with no nearby family and her husband's family living far away in Mississippi, felt even more inferior to her intelligent and educated husband. Tensions rose when Timothy accused Amber of having an affair with their neighbor. Their marriage began to fall apart, and they considered getting a divorce. Timothy wanted sole custody of the children, so he visited a therapist and asked for a statement to give to his divorce lawyer, claiming he was capable of raising the children on his own. Amber, who didn't have a lawyer and was unsure of what to do, eventually decided it would be best for the children to stay with their father, as she was unemployed and lacked education. As the primary breadwinner, Timothy was granted full custody, and Amber was allowed to visit the children regularly. She left her husband and children behind. However, Timothy's mental state began to deteriorate. Haunted by his failed marriage, he started using drugs and drinking again, struggling with the voices in his head. He became easily provoked over minor issues, and Amber reported that he had once beaten her in front of their children until she lost consciousness. As Timothy struggled to balance work and taking care of the children, he hired a nanny service despite his own instability. The first 2 nannies observed that his home was spotless, and he was dedicated and attentive to his children. Later, he switched services and hired 17-year-old Crystal, who had a young daughter of her own. Timothy soon began an affair with the nanny and attempted to convert her to his religion, insisting she adopt the church's customs, such as wearing long dresses, growing her hair out, and submitting to his authority. When Crystal refused, their relationship began to fall apart. Crystal later stated that Timothy was extremely harsh towards his children, making them stand on their toes for hours, because he believed punishment was necessary to purify their sick bodies. She left after catching him trying to hit her young daughter. After Crystal's departure, Timothy hired another nanny who noticed a significant change in him. His previously clean home was now filthy, filled with trash, dirty clothes, and infested with cockroaches. Over time, Timothy Jones Jr. became increasingly violent, punishing his children daily. He started feeding them only oatmeal throughout the day, limiting them to one meal. In August 2014, the nanny contacted South Carolina's social services to report the neglect and abuse in Timothy's home. She described the lack of food and the physical abuse the children suffered. The abuse was so severe that the teachers at the elementary school, attended by the older children, had previously reported it to the agency months earlier. The agency had required Jones to sign a written promise never to mistreat or hit his children again, as they often arrived at school with bruises. On the afternoon of Thursday, August 28, 2014, Timothy picked up his 3 older children from elementary school and his 2 younger ones from the nanny around 7 p.m. Timothy became enraged about some broken outlets in their mobile home. He questioned his 6-year-old son Nathan about the damage, and when Nathan denied any involvement, Timothy forced Nathan to do push-ups, squats, and other exercises repeatedly, while whipping him with a belt whenever he slowed down. Amber, Timothy's ex-wife, called to talk to her kids. During the call, Nathan told his mom about the punishment he got for breaking some outlets, saying it was an accident. Timothy got angry, ended the call, and told Amber to stop protecting Nathan. After hours of being punished, Nathan was extremely tired, dehydrated, and begging for it to stop. He passed out, and Timothy carried him to bed, leaving him alone without water or any help. Phone records show that Amber tried to call back 8 more times, but Timothy didn't answer. Around 1 a.m., Timothy searched for a specific scene from the movie American History on YouTube, even though he knew Nathan was already unconscious. At around 1 a.m., Timothy took his 8-year-old daughter Mia to a local store to buy 10 packs of cigarettes. When they got back home, Timothy grabbed Mia and started choking her. Then he went to his 7-year-old son Elias and did the same thing. After that, he took off his belt and went to his 2-year-old son Gabriel and 1-year-old daughter Elaine, putting the belt around their necks and pulling until they stopped breathing. Seeing that the kids weren't moving, Timothy took their sheets and blankets, wrapped each of them separately, and put them in the back seat of his car. On Friday, August 29th, Jones's father called him at 7:43 a.m., but got no response. Later, at 9:36 a.m., the nanny tried calling Jones and finally got through to him on her second attempt. She asked if he would be taking the younger kids to daycare, and he told her not to worry, saying he would take them the following week, explaining that they were currently out of town and would return by Tuesday. Between noon and 2 p.m. that day, Jones drove around, searching online for out-of-state drugs. At 1:27 p.m., he was near Alabama, but he ignored his grandmother's multiple calls, totaling 23 attempts between 3 and 5 p.m. During this time, Jones also searched online for tobacco shops in Alabama and Mississippi, as well as campsites in South Carolina. His location was recorded in Georgia at 8:04 p.m. The next day, August 30th, his grandmother continued sending messages, asking why he wasn't responding to her calls. Then, on August 31st, his phone's location was recorded in Red Bank, New Jersey, at 10:08 a.m. Jones spent the day searching the internet for camping stores, RV parks, and landfills in South Carolina, as well as animal services. He also looked up 2 songs at 4:54 p.m. Timothy Jones Jr. received a reminder from the nanny to bring diapers when he dropped off Gabriel. An hour later, he responded, informing her that he had left South Carolina with the children to start anew, and asking her to clean the mobile home, giving her permission to take whatever she wanted from the belongings he left behind. On September 1st, Timothy was driving from one place to another. The next morning, at 10:35, he searched online for information on disposing of bodies in landfills, making muriatic acid, and camping near countries with no extradition laws, as he was facing legal issues and considering his escape options. Throughout the day, he received updates from the nanny, who had cleaned the mobile home. His boss at Intel also messaged him, inquiring about his work attendance, around 6 p.m., On the morning of September 3rd, a co-worker called him twice, but Timothy did not respond. Later, surveillance video captured Timothy at a well-known store, purchasing a saw, muriatic acid, garbage bags, a 5-gallon bucket, and goggles at 3:37 a.m. He also searched online for information about his missing children. On September 4th at 6:33 a.m., Timothy Jones Jr.'s location was tracked to Charleston, South Carolina, where he deposited a check for $3,508 at a bank. The next day, on September 5th, his phone was briefly turned on in Louisville, Georgia, but his exact location was not recorded. On the morning of September 6th, Jones placed the decomposing bodies of his children in black plastic garbage bags and abandoned them in a clearing along a rural forest road in Alabama, which was recorded at 9:14 a.m. The bodies had been in the back seat of his vehicle since August 29th. Later that day, at around 7 p.m., Jones was stopped at a traffic checkpoint in Smith County, Mississippi. A police officer approached his vehicle and noticed a strong, unpleasant smell coming from inside, as well as apparent bleach stains on the carpet that suggested a recent cleaning attempt. When questioned about the whereabouts of his children, Jones initially denied having any children, then claimed he had 3 children who were in South Carolina. The officers asked for the phone numbers of his father, grandmother, and ex-wife to verify the children's safety, and after making the calls, they promptly arrested Jones. Jones felt overwhelmed with sorrow and anger when he caught one of his sons playing with an electrical outlet. In a fit of rage, he grabbed the boy by the neck and choked him until he lost consciousness. Later, he used a belt to discipline his other son, as his hands were too large to fit around the boy's neck. When his eldest daughter walked into the room and saw what was happening, Jones grabbed her and choked her with his hands until her face turned purple. After the incident, Jones put his son Nathan to bed, only to discover him dead when he checked on him later. During the investigation, Jones explained that he killed his children because he heard voices in his head, leading him to believe they were plotting against him. He also thought that they would be better off in heaven. During his attempted escape, Jones drove through the southeast with the bodies of his 5 children hidden under blankets in his car. He eventually dumped their bodies in a remote Alabama forest before being arrested by chance during a routine traffic stop in Mississippi. Timothy claimed it was an accident and said the punishment he imposed on Nathan went too far, leading to the boy's death from exhaustion caused by the strenuous exercises. When he found Nathan lifeless in his room, Timothy was overcome with panic and decided to kill all his children. The pathologist found it difficult to determine the exact cause of Nathan's death, but suggested that the excessive exercise had weakened him so much that it would have taken minimal force to end his life. The investigators were puzzled as to why Timothy didn't call for emergency services if he genuinely believed it was an accident. Instead, he attempted to hide and dispose of the children's bodies on the same day. Timothy eventually agreed to take the investigators to the location where he had hidden the bodies. On September 11th, authorities recovered the remains of Timothy Jones's 5 children. The evidence collected from his car was handed over to South Carolina authorities and included personal items such as family photos, children's clothing, drawings by the children, letters written by their mother to the children, Timothy Jones's university diploma, and his passport. Additionally, handwritten notes by Jones were found, detailing to-do lists that included instructions on how to dispose of bodies, including grinding bones into powder or small pieces, and burning them. The lists also mentioned supplies needed, such as camping gear, gasoline, and muriatic acid. Upon his arrest on September 13, 2014, Jones was placed in a special isolation cell away from the general prison population. Since then, he has undergone evaluation by various mental health professionals, including psychiatrists, clinical psychologists, and forensic experts. Although the experts' opinions differ, some have diagnosed Jones with schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, schizoaffective disorder, or personality disorder. These experts suggest that Jones's mental state at the time of the crime might have been exacerbated by his drug use and a traumatic brain injury he suffered at the age of 15, which could have contributed to an underlying psychotic condition. In late May 2019, Timothy Jones Jr. was tried for a crime considered one of the worst murders in South Carolina's history. The trial featured weeks of intense testimonies and evidence presented against him. After only 2 hours of deliberation, the jury delivered a verdict on June 13, 2019, sentencing Jones Jr. to death. Currently, he is being held in solitary confinement at a correctional institution, where he wears a green jumpsuit that distinguishes him as a death row inmate. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of the Romand family. This is the shocking case of the Romand family. Jean-Claude Romand was born on February 11, 1954, in Le Rive, France, and was raised in Clairvaux, Jura. He attended Le Lycée de Lons-le-Saunier until he completed his baccalaureate in 1971. He started classes at Université de Lyon 1, but left after 1 term, later joining medical school. He would later marry a woman named Florence Cray. Florence Cray was born on March 6, 1956. She studied at the University of Lyon to become a doctor. It was there that she met Jean-Claude Romand, who was a distant cousin of the family. Initially, Jean-Claude did not capture Florence's interest, and they barely knew each other, not spending much time together. However, over time, through their mutual friends and study sessions, they started spending more time together. Jean-Claude Romand was immediately infatuated with Florence and made persistent efforts to win her over. She, on the other hand, saw him as an ordinary guy, not particularly attractive to her or well-spoken. Florence had envisioned marrying a typical doctor, intelligent, attractive, and charming. Following a failed second-year exam, she switched from medicine to pharmacy, together with Romand and Luc Ladmiral, who passed their exams. For the next decade, they maintained a routine of studying, taking exams, and supporting each other until graduation in 1980. Florence and Jean-Claude Romand got married, and 6 years later, they had their first child, Caroline. 2 years after Caroline's birth, their son Antoine was born. Florence lived the life of a conventional wife and mother, working at local pharmacies to support her family, while her husband worked at the World Health Organization in Geneva, a short distance from their home in France. Florence was going about her daily routine in Ferney-Voltaire, France, a few days after Christmas in 1992. With her children, Caroline and Antoine, at school, and her husband Jean-Claude at work in Geneva, it was a normal day, filled with thoughts of their recent Christmas celebrations. While out, she ran into the school president, who had been wanting to talk to her about something since before the holidays. As they exchanged pleasantries and discussed their Christmas experiences, their conversation slowly turned to an unexpected topic, an intriguing incident involving her husband. The headmaster informed Florence about the headmaster's demotion due to an affair with a teacher, which had led to a school board meeting. Florence recalled the incident, but she was uncertain about the headmaster's intentions. The president revealed his plan to discuss the matter with Jean-Claude, who was also a member of the school board. The president's secretary tried to find Jean-Claude's contact information in the World Health Organization directory, where he worked, but his name was not listed. Florence found this odd and somewhat amusing, and she promised to ask her husband about it when he returned from work. After their exchange, they never spoke again. Jean-Claude Romand maintained a high level of privacy regarding his professional life, sharing only limited information with his family and friends. Florence believed that her husband was involved in important research and was well respected in the medical field. Romand drew a clear distinction between his work and personal life, to the point that Florence did not have access to his office phone number, as he wanted to remain undisturbed during work hours. If Florence needed to communicate with him urgently, she had to page him, and he would promptly return her call when he was available. Friends often asked Jean-Claude's role at the WHO when speaking with Florence. They would inquire about what exactly Jean-Claude did at the WHO. Florence would try to divert the question with a chuckle, admitting that she too was unsure. Occasionally, she would jokingly speculate that one day she might find out her husband was a secret agent. During the Christmas season of 1992, Florence found out about an annual Christmas tree decorating event organized by the WHO. Her husband had never told her about this event, which made her feel uneasy. From the school president mentioning her husband's absence in the WHO directory, to discovering the unmentioned family event at his workplace after many years of service, these incidents stayed on Florence's mind. It is uncertain how much these revelations troubled her internally, and whether she ever confronted her husband about them. Florence's brother, who was visiting for the holidays, noticed that she seemed deeply saddened during that time. Unfortunately, we can only imagine what conversations took place within the household during this period. As the days went by, the year 1993 began. Just a few days into the new year, Florence and Jean-Claude Romand went shopping together, with Florence encouraging Romand to buy a new suit. Later that same day, after leaving his wife, Romand visited a pharmacy and placed an order that would be ready by January 9th. On the evening of January 5th, Romand withdrew a total of 2,000 francs from 2 different ATMs. He then gave 500 francs to a homeless person he met before going to a gun store. When he left the store, he had tear gas canisters, cartridges, a silencer for a .22 caliber rifle, and a stun wand. The night of January 10th to 11th was uneventful, but at 4 a.m. on January 11th, a frantic call was made to the fire brigade to report a house fire. Garbage collectors, who were out on their early morning rounds, stumbled upon the burning house and quickly alerted the fire brigade, who rushed to the scene. As the firefighters battled the blaze, they noticed movement in the upstairs bedroom window, suggesting that someone was inside and needed help. Medical personnel was summoned to the scene, and they rescued Jean-Claude Romand from the residence. When he was extracted from the house, Romand appeared to be in shock and was unresponsive, requiring immediate attention from paramedics. He was subsequently taken to the hospital, where he eventually fell into a coma. Within a short time, the fire was put out, allowing the first responders to enter the building. Their family friend, Dr. Luc Ladmiral, was called to the scene, where he watched in horror as stretchers carried out the charred remains of Antoine, Caroline, and Florence. Whenever a household fire results in fatalities, the police launch an inquiry to uncover the circumstances surrounding the incident. This process aims to offer closure to the bereaved families and eliminate the possibility of any criminal activity. Therefore, following the tragic fire at the Romand residence, law enforcement authorities initiated an investigation. During the examination of Florence's remains, the medical team made a disconcerting observation: evidence of blunt force trauma to the back of her skull. This revelation sparked suspicion and intrigue, particularly after determining that Florence's demise resulted from blunt force trauma rather than the fire itself. During the examination of the children, another distressing revelation emerged. Contrary to initial assumptions, both Caroline and Antoine did not perish in the fire. Instead, they met their demise from gunshot wounds hours prior to the inferno. This stark reality indicated that the events unfolded before the household was consumed by flames. Subsequently, law enforcement commenced an inquiry into the suspicious deaths of Florence and her children. However, with Jean-Claude Romand incapacitated in a coma, rendering him unable to provide any information, investigators faced the daunting task of pursuing alternative leads. They transformed the Romand residence into a crime scene and reached out to relatives, acquaintances, and neighbors in a bid to unravel the mysteries surrounding the family. Luc Ladmiral, the doctor who witnessed the victims being removed from the scene, was contacted as part of the investigation. Uncertain about the unfolding events, he struggled to comprehend the situation when questioned by investigators about potential enemies of the family. Luke couldn't identify any. Nevertheless, he was summoned for an interview several days later. Luke found himself facing police officers who probed into the family's relationships and recent events that could have triggered the fire. Despite thorough questioning, the consensus remained unchanged. The family had enjoyed a positive reputation, and no significant incidents had preceded the tragedy. Subsequently, the focus shifted to Jean-Claude Romand, revealing a shocking revelation. Romand had never been employed by the World Health Organization, nor had he delivered any lectures at the University of Dijon. In fact, he was not a qualified doctor at all, let alone being employed. Initially skeptical, Luke's disbelief gradually subsided as he recalled their shared academic journey, which gradually led him to a startling realization. He recounted to the authorities an incident from their second year when he had noticed Jean-Claude Romand's absence during an exam. This departure from Romand's typical behavior had raised concerns for Luke. When Luke visited Romand at his residence, he observed his friend's poor health, with clammy skin, a pale complexion, and dark circles under his eyes. Jean-Claude Romand confided that he was battling lymphoma, a manageable form of cancer, which was exacerbated by exam-related stress. At Romand's request, Luke promised to keep this information confidential, particularly from Florence. Investigators concluded that Luke had no further relevant information. Consequently, they anticipated the forensic laboratory's findings on the incinerated residence, hoping to gain additional insights to aid their investigation. Investigators noted peculiarities within the residence. They discovered that all doors had been locked internally, indicating that no unauthorized individuals had entered the premises. Initially, an accidental fire was the primary hypothesis until the condition of the bodies was revealed. Subsequent findings hinted at a more sinister turn of events, prompting the urgent need to interview Jean-Claude during his coma-induced weeks. Law enforcement zeroed in on Jean-Claude Romand as their prime suspect and initiated a thorough investigation. Although Romand lacked a medical degree, his extended tenure at the university raised suspicions. The educational institution confirmed that Romand had pursued studies for 12 years. While he successfully completed his first-year exams, he failed to pass those in the second year. Exploiting the absence of enrollment restrictions, Romand continuously re-enrolled in the second year throughout his academic tenure. Despite years of academic dedication, attending lectures and studying medical books, Jean-Claude's failure to pass the second examination remained perplexing. The possibility of oversleeping and missing the exam session was considered a plausible explanation, and he had the opportunity to retake the exam months later, but he never showed up. As investigators examined the deaths of Florence and the children, they were confronted with another tragic discovery. Jean-Claude's uncle, trying to convey the devastating news to his parents, arrived at their home only to be met with an unsettling silence. Upon entering, he found the lifeless bodies of his mother and father, both having suffered fatal gunshot wounds. A forensic analysis confirmed that Jean-Claude's parents were killed with the same weapon used to murder Antoine and Caroline. Furthermore, the close proximity of their estimated time of death indicated a deliberate connection. The unfolding events only grew more mysterious following the public disclosure of the tragedies. The police received an anonymous call from a woman unwilling to disclose her identity or any personal information, expressing reluctance to involve herself in the investigation. However, she did possess crucial information to share, revealing that she had engaged in a romantic relationship with Jean-Claude Romand after meeting him in Paris, and she too had been told that he was a researcher at the World Health Organization and had misled her into believing he was a specialist with influential connections. The woman had been led to believe that Jean-Claude Romand was actively involved in and financing significant research projects. Moreover, he portrayed the banks in Geneva as highly advantageous, leveraging his supposed position. Remand enticed her with the opportunity to invest funds in a Swiss bank, offering an impressive 18% interest rate return. Through persuasive tactics, Remand managed to persuade his lover to make a financial investment. Initially hesitant, they reached an agreement wherein the woman would provide him with 990,000 francs for investment, with the expectation of receiving returns after 3 months. As the deadline approached in early January, she reminded Jean-Claude Remand of their arrangement, emphasizing her need for the funds to sustain herself and her family. Following negotiations, they arranged to meet for a dinner gathering, with Remand extending an invitation to dine with a prominent political figure, sparking the woman's interest and eagerness to reclaim her investment. On the agreed day, Remand picks her up in Paris to embark on their anticipated journey. As night descended, Jean-Claude Remand and the woman found themselves still on the road, clearly lost. Suddenly, Remand pulled over and launched a surprise attack on the woman inside the car. He employed tear gas, a stun wand, and a cable in an attempt to incapacitate her. However, she fiercely fought for her life and managed to escape from the vehicle. Remand pursued her, but inexplicably halted when she pleaded for mercy. It seemed that he realized his plan had failed, and he begged for forgiveness. The excuse he provided to the woman was now familiar to the investigators. He claimed that his lymphoma was flaring up, causing him to behave erratically and unlike his usual self, in a state of survival mode. The woman agreed to remain silent about the incident, in exchange for Jean-Claude safely returning her home. Investigators began to develop a grim perception of Jean-Claude Remand. He was a pathological liar, a manipulator, and a scam artist. But the question that lingered in the detectives' minds now was he also a murderer? Upon awakening from his coma, Jean-Claude Remand was promptly approached by investigators, eager to engage in conversation. With suspicions lingering, they sought a confession from him. However, Remand chose to remain silent. He sat in his hospital bed, gazing into the distance with a vacant expression, refraining from speaking as inquiries swirled about the events of January 9th, the origins of the fire, the shooting of Antoine and Caroline, and the severe injuries sustained by his wife. Jean-Claude faced a barrage of interrogative probes during multiple sessions. Despite the relentless questioning, he divulged nothing. It wasn't until the investigators told him that they knew the truth, that he was not a doctor and was unemployed, that a shift occurred. The tipping point that prompted him to finally break his silence remains unknown, but eventually, he began to speak. On the night of January 9th, Jean-Claude and Florence were spending a typical evening at home. After putting the children to bed, they retired to their own bedroom. According to Jean-Claude Remand, his memories of that night abruptly ceased until the chilling recollection of discovering his wife sprawled on their bed, surrounded by a pool of blood, with a bloodied rolling pin in his hand. Uncertain of what transpired, whether an argument had ensued or not, Jean-Claude ran and proceeded to sleep beside his wife. He awoke the following morning to prepare breakfast for the children, Caroline and Antoine, who had gathered on the couch to watch a cartoon selected by their father. He served them each a bowl of cereal before joining them to watch television. When the children inquired about their mother's absence, he informed them that she was unwell and needed extra rest during that morning. Jean-Claude observed that Caroline felt warm, prompting concerns about her health. To prevent any potential illness from spreading, he instructed Caroline to go upstairs to her bedroom. Somehow, Caroline ended up lying face down on the bed with a pillow over her head. Remand couldn't provide a clear explanation to investigators regarding this sequence of events, but speculated that it may have evolved from a game he played with his daughter. Subsequently, he retrieved his .22 caliber rifle, fitted with a silencer, and fatally shot his 7-year-old daughter in the back of her head. In a similar manner, Antoine met his tragic demise. His memories then became hazy. Subsequent evidence presented during the trial indicated that he left the house, purchased newspapers, and appeared to engage in routine activities, portraying a normal demeanor to any casual observer. Upon returning home, he watched television. Although Jean-Claude refuted these details during the trial, one fact remained certain. He received a phone call from his parents inviting him for lunch before noon on that fateful day, and he accepted the invitation. Departing from his eerily quiet residence, he drove to his parents' home and joined them for lunch. He then summoned his father upstairs under the guise of inspecting a purportedly malfunctioning boiler pipe. Despite his elderly father's physical limitations, he made an effort to examine the pipe at Jean-Claude's request, only to be callously shot in the back by his own son. Descending to where his mother was, he did not concoct any games or stories this time. His mother became the sole victim whom he shot while facing her. The motive behind this act remains a mystery. Before departing, he also shot the family's dog. When questioned about this during the trial, it was the only instance where he exhibited a semblance of remorse. Overcome with emotion, he broke down in sobs and tears, revealing that the dog had been cherished by his children, evoking memories of Caroline. It was at this moment that Jean-Claude Romand resolved to return home and take his own life. However, his plan did not unfold as intended. Recall the earlier mention of his mistress providing him with 990,000 francs for an alleged investment scheme. This was how Jean-Claude Romand sustained himself. He regaled numerous individuals, including his relatives and Florence's family, with tales of extravagant returns on investments. Due to their familiarity with Romand, they placed their full trust in him, and they let him cook. Consequently, he amassed substantial sums of money from these trusting individuals over time. He would channel these funds into accounts under his own name in Geneva, thereby avoiding scrutiny from tax authorities, among others. Moreover, he meticulously managed the family's financial affairs, ensuring that Florence remained unaware of his deceitful activities. Eventually, the inevitable time to serve what he was cooking arrived. As expected, the people began demanding the return of their money, along with the promised profits. Regrettably, this was an obligation he could never fulfill. Every single franc he acquired was swiftly spent on his immediate needs, leaving him with virtually nothing saved, despite amassing over 2 million francs across the years. The inevitable moment arrived when he would have to reveal the truth to Florence and all those who had entrusted him with their money. He found himself unable to sustain his web of lies any longer. The mounting pressure left him feeling trapped with no apparent escape. Like many other family annihilators, he convinced himself that by ending their lives, he would actually be sparing his family from the repercussions of his actions. Subsequently, he planned to take his own life, thus avoiding the harsh reality he faced. He believed he would be able to keep lying forever and had never anticipated being discovered or facing the need to confess. He would always just plan to fabricate another falsehood to sustain the charade. Throughout his life, on June 23, 1996, the trial commenced. He remained mostly silent, seated behind glass with a police officer on each side. He avoided making eye contact and kept his head down. By July 2nd, a verdict had been reached. Jean-Claude Romand was convicted of the murders of his wife, his children, and his parents. He received a life sentence without the possibility of parole for 22 years. In 2019, he petitioned for release from prison to reside in a convent during his incarceration. He had reportedly become a devout Christian and had accepted his mistakes. He would spend the rest of his life repenting as a form of punishment. The judge granted his plea, citing his good conduct as a contributing factor. It is sad and unfortunate what all the victims endured at the hands of this liar, manipulator, and monstrous individual. As we reflect on this horrific tale, our hearts and minds are with the individuals whose lives were abruptly ended, and the grieving families and friends they left behind. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Christy Shawn. The tragic loss of a young woman named Christy Shawn and her husband Joseph Codd in 2015 shocked the quiet provincial town of Lear, North Carolina. This incident was one of the loudest and most brutal crimes in the history of this small community. At the time of the tragedy, the couple was joyously anticipating the addition of a new family member. However, the most horrifying aspect was that their perpetrator was someone they knew well, trusted, and considered a friend. Furthermore, they were not his only victims. Christy Maria Shawn Codd was born on September 3, 1976, in Madrid, Spain. She was the only child of American military personnel. Her father was a U.S. Air Force soldier who frequently moved around due to his duties, along with his wife and daughter. The family did not stay long in Spain, moving to various European countries before returning to the United States. Christy started school in New Orleans, Louisiana, but the family soon moved to Texas, then Illinois. After that, Shawn spent several years in Latin American countries. This nomadic lifestyle had benefits, as Christy learned multiple languages from an early age and experienced various cultures and traditions. However, during her teenage years, she faced challenges in settling into new groups and making friends in new places. Just as she would start to settle in, it was time to pack up, move, and change schools and social circles. Yet, it was precisely because of the constant changes that she developed excellent communication skills. Christy easily found common ground with various people and was known as a sweet, sociable, and charming young woman. Additionally, from an early age, she actively participated in sports, including gymnastics and swimming. For some time, she took kickboxing classes. When Christy finished school, her father retired from the military, and the family settled in Balloy, Mississippi. There, she finally made real friends and discovered a new hobby: cooking. The teenager enjoyed preparing various dishes, experimented a lot in the kitchen, and her culinary masterpieces indeed deserved attention and praise. Eventually, she decided to pursue further development in this area and completed culinary courses. Her parents thought she would become a professional chef, but unexpectedly, she also discovered her talent for acting. An actress and culinary TV star, a beautiful and ambitious young woman brimming with talent, enrolled in an acting academy and moved to Los Angeles. There, broad prospects opened before her, and she intelligently seized every opportunity to make her mark. Christy appeared in commercials, performed on the theater stage, and also took part in some high-profile Hollywood productions as an extra or stunt performer. Specifically, she had a minor role in the Terminator franchise, performing quite risky stunts. In 2000, the young woman graduated from the academy. By that time, she had not landed any significant or notable roles, despite her striking appearance and evident talent. She then decided to focus on her culinary skills and sports, turning these two passions into a quite profitable business. Christy participated in several popular culinary TV shows, which made her well known, turning her into a popular and recognizable figure. She made it to the finals of one season of the next Food Network Star, but unfortunately, she did not win, as the judges had mixed reviews of her culinary experiments. However, Shawn was not greatly dismayed, as she managed to attract considerable attention to herself. Thousands of people followed her on social media, keeping up with her life and creations. She actively promoted a healthy lifestyle, gave advice on proper nutrition, and even developed her own exercise routines to maintain good physical condition. About a year later, Christy founded and began successfully developing her own catering company. The company provided banquet services for various events and also retailed prepared culinary products. Her business was distinctive in that it focused on proper and healthy eating. Additionally, the menu featured her own original recipes, which she created and perfected. Soon, the young woman contemplated starting her own farm, which would grow healthy and environmentally friendly produce. This would help her expand her business in the catering industry. At the same time, she conducted online courses on proper nutrition and developed several other projects. In a fateful encounter on TV in 2012, Christy met Joseph Timothy Codd, better known as JT, who worked as a casting director in television. responsible for selecting participants and actors for various high-rated projects. They first met at a studio in Los Angeles during the casting for a culinary show that the young woman wanted to participate in, and they instantly clicked. Joseph was nearly 7 years older than Christy, had been married before, but was in the process of divorcing at the time they met. He was utterly charmed by the beauty and charisma of this delightful blonde, and he began to court her. The young woman was not averse to his attention, and soon they began a romantic relationship. Joseph shared and supported the ideas of his beloved, and together they began to work on the project of their own farm. Soon after, the couple decided to leave Los Angeles and moved from sunny California to North Carolina. They sold Christie's quite successful and well-established catering business. Joseph sold his house in Hollywood, and they invested all the proceeds in buying a large piece of land in the town of Leicester. The couple acquired a spacious and cozy house, as well as a nearly 1-acre plot of land, to realize their dream. The man continued working with TV channels, but now did so remotely. Meanwhile, the woman focused on developing her personal blog about nutrition and a healthy lifestyle. They were seen as an ideal couple, with a relationship built on love and harmony. The couple eventually decided to formalize their relationship. In August 2014, they celebrated their union with a grand wedding attended by several hundred guests. The event was graced by relatives, friends, colleagues, neighbors, and even some fans of the famous couple. They were genuinely happy and had many plans for their future together. 3 months after their wedding, they received the news that they were going to be parents for the first time. Their joy knew no bounds. During a routine ultrasound examination after the new year, the doctor revealed that they were expecting a daughter. A few days later, during a phone conversation with her mother, Krista mentioned that they had chosen the name Skylar for their first child. The pregnancy was progressing smoothly and everything seemed perfect. However, their happiness was tragically cut short by the sudden disappearance of the couple. Christy, who was 5 months pregnant and actively preparing for the arrival of their baby, would frequently call her parents, who lived in another state, to share updates on her well-being and chat with her mother for long periods. On March 13, 2015, Christy's mother couldn't reach her daughter, but initially didn't think much of it. The same situation occurred the next day, with calls going unanswered. Both Christy and Joseph's phones were eventually turned off by March 15th, leaving her mother concerned as she lived in another state and couldn't quickly check on her children's well-being. As a result, Christy's mother contacted a close friend of her daughter named Cecily, who lived nearby and could go to their home to check on them. When Cecily arrived at the Codd residence, she observed both spouses' cars parked there. However, the front door was locked, and despite her attempts to get their attention, no one answered. Their phones had been switched off for 3 days, adding to the concern. Peering through a window, she spotted their cherished dogs left alone inside the house, which was unusual. Upon circling the property, she noticed the back door lock had been forcefully tampered with, suggesting a break-in. Cecily immediately contacted Christy's mother, who promptly alerted the authorities. The police confirmed signs of forced entry through the back door and found the interior in disarray, indicating a search had taken place. Valuables were missing, such as a jewelry box and a breached safe in the couple's bedroom. Despite the chaos, there were no signs of a struggle or bloodshed, indicating a non-violent disappearance. The culprit seemed careful, leaving no identifiable traces behind. While family members hoped for the couple's safe return, veteran officers held a less optimistic view. The investigation hit a roadblock early on with few leads. The missing couple had no known adversaries, making it difficult to piece together the events. Their phones were found at home, last active on March 12th, receiving only incoming calls after that day. Subsequently, the police interviewed neighbors in search of any unusual occurrences. One neighbor reported seeing a local resident dumping a large parcel into a trash can near the Codd's home. On March 15th, he didn't think much of what happened in the morning. But when he heard about the disappearance of the couple, he thought the information could be helpful for the investigation. Unfortunately, checking the bins was no longer an option, as the trash had already been taken to the dump the day before. Any potential evidence would now have to be searched for there. However, the police wanted to talk to the person who got rid of the strange bundle first. The person turned out to be a 36-year-old man named Robert Jason Owens. He lived on the same street and was well known to the couple, even considered a close family friend. Robert, who worked as a handyman, had helped Christy and Joseph when they first moved into their new house. They became friends, and they even invited their new friend and neighbor to their wedding. Although at first nothing seemed suspicious, some locals described Owens as odd and unpredictable. On March 16th, Robert was asked to come to the police station for questioning. Initially, he denied any involvement in the couple's disappearance and claimed to know nothing about the bundle mentioned earlier. At that point, there wasn't much evidence to charge him with, except for an unverified claim from another neighbor. However, things took a sudden turn that evening after investigators discovered the same strange bundle at the landfill. Inside were items from the missing couple's home, with Robert's fingerprints and DNA found on partially burned clothing belonging to Christy and Joseph, a blanket and a throw stained with blood from their home. This evidence confirmed the police's suspicion that the couple were no longer alive. Any doubts were dispelled when the police searched Owen's home and discovered charred human skeletal remains in his wood stove. Robert was then considered a suspect in the gruesome killing of his neighbor and his pregnant wife. Despite his denials and conflicting statements, he eventually confessed after several hours. His admissions were truly shocking. He admitted to committing a double fatal incident, but insisted it was accidental. One evening, on March 12th, he went to his friend's house. He swerved off the road to avoid hitting an object and got stuck in the mud. He then went to the couple's house and asked for help pushing his car out. They agreed. While they were pushing, Robert accidentally hit the gas instead of the brake, running over the couple. Afraid of being accused of their deaths, he didn't call the police. Instead, he covered it up. He broke into their house, took blankets to move their bodies, then dismembered them in his bathroom using a saw and a small axe. He threw their bodies into a fire on his stove, but kept their clothing, blankets, and footwear. He disposed of these in a trash bag and threw it away, thinking no one would find them in a landfill. He claimed he staged a burglary, but in reality, he had robbed his friend's home himself, stealing money and valuables, which he pawned the next day. The police found blood-stained tools in his house, as well as skin and bone fragments. He didn't bother to hide them, thinking he wouldn't be connected to the crime. Forensic analysis confirmed that bone fragments found in Owen's stove belonged to the missing couple. Law enforcement then decided to delve deeper into Robert's background. It turned out Robert was unmarried with no children. He barely maintained any contact with relatives. Previously living in Asheville, North Carolina, until 2000, when he bought land in Leicester and later built a house there. In fact, it turned out his linked to an unresolved crime from 15 years earlier that occurred in Asheville as well. In the year 2000, Robert's close friend Zeb Quinn, who was just 18 at the time, mysteriously disappeared. Robert and Zeb had known each other since school, living nearby and maintaining a strong friendship. Zeb was undergoing military training while also working part-time at Walmart. On January 2nd, 2000, after finishing his shift, Quinn met with Robert to plan a trip to Leicester to buy a new car. However, he never returned home. A few days later, his Mazda protege was discovered in another part of town. The car was parked with its headlights on, and intriguingly, a heart was drawn on the window using red lipstick. The owner of the car was never found. The vehicle also had noticeable damage and scratches with traces of paint from another vehicle. The last person to see Zeb was Robert. Incidentally, Robert's car also exhibited damage. It turned out that the scratches contained paint particles from Zeb's car. Robert recounted an unusual and implausible story. Shortly after they headed towards Leicester, Zeb signaled him to stop abruptly. Zeb claimed he had received a message on his pager and urgently needed to use a payphone. After asking Robert to wait, he drove off to a nearby gas station, but returned 10 minutes later looking frantic. He then said their plans had changed and drove off in an unknown direction, accidentally hitting his friend's car in the process. It was also revealed that Zeb had a romantic relationship with a woman named Misty Taylor, whose former boyfriend, Wesley Smith, had threatened him if he did not stop seeing Misty Taylor. Smith and Owens were questioned about the case. However, due to insufficient evidence, all three were released. Additionally, Misty and Wesley had alibis, which did not apply to Robert. Zeb had a significant amount of money and his pager in his vehicle, but they disappeared. It's unknown what message he received on his pager, if any. The investigation suggested there might not have been a message. A strange incident occurred when someone called Walmart claiming to be Zeb the day after he went missing, saying he was sick and wouldn't be coming to work. However, the colleague who answered found the voice unfamiliar. The call was traced to a Volvo plant where Robert worked. Owens later admitted to making the call at a friend's request. No new evidence or witnesses have emerged, leaving Zeb Quinn still missing. 15 years later, Owens was interrogated again and suspected of involvement in Zeb's disappearance. In June 2015, the case was reopened, revealing unexpected details. Although Robert stuck to his original story, a thorough search of his property uncovered a detached concrete slab with a walled-off cavity containing charred human bone fragments. Unfortunately, the remains were too damaged for DNA analysis to confirm if they were Quinn's. During an interview with a neighbor, more surprising details emerged. An elderly man living nearby recalled an event from January 2000 when young Owens had just bought the land and started building his house. One evening, Owens ignited a fire that produced a strange, sickly sweet odor. The neighbor confronted him because the wind was carrying the smell towards him, almost making him ill. Soon after, Owens covered the fire pit with concrete, claiming he intended to construct a small fountain there, a plan he never carried out. The neighbor had forgotten about the foul-smelling fire until 15 years later, when the police showed up at the property. Owens eventually admitted to being involved in a crime and shared a completely different account. According to him, Zeb was murdered by his uncle, Walter Owens, who had been hired by Wesley Smith to get rid of Misty's new boyfriend, whom Smith still loved. Robert stated he was unaware of this scheme at the time. His uncle had asked him to lure Zeb to a secluded location. Upon reaching a wooded area on the road to Lure, Walter instructed them to halt their car and signal Quinn to do the same. Once Quinn stepped out of his vehicle, Walter shot him quietly and then instructed Robert to assist in dismembering and packaging the body. The remains were incinerated on Robert's property that same night and encased in concrete. As Walter Owens had passed away several years before his nephew's confession, interrogating him was no longer an option. Despite Robert's gruesome revelation, no evidence was discovered at the alleged crime scene, making the account appear highly implausible. Details concerning legal proceedings, a plea agreement, and final judgments remain unclear, but are crucial for achieving true justice in this distressing case. Robert initially faced serious charges including first-degree double murder, murder of an unborn child, dismemberment, concealment of evidence, burglary, and robbery, which could have resulted in the death penalty. However, it was later revealed that he had long struggled with depression and mental disorders, necessitating strong medication. His lawyer used this information to argue an insanity defense, potentially leading to confinement in a psychiatric facility instead of prison. This outcome did not satisfy the prosecution or the victims' families. Simultaneously, an investigation into Quinn's case commenced, raising the possibility of the perpetrator evading punishment. In 2017, Robert agreed to a plea deal, confessing to the murder of the Codds in exchange for avoiding the death penalty. He was convicted of second-degree manslaughter, dismemberment and incineration of bodies, burglary and robbery, receiving a 59-year prison sentence. In 2022, Owens struck another plea deal regarding Quinn's case, admitting complicity in the murder and aiding in concealing evidence. This admission led to an additional 12 years being added to his existing lengthy sentence. Following sentencing, the murderer asked for forgiveness from the victims' families, maintaining his innocence and attributing the crimes to an unfortunate accident and his mental health challenges. However, the families of Christe and Joseph Codd, as well as Quinn's relatives, remained unconvinced. They could not accept the notion of unintentional murder, believing that Robert had acted purposefully and selfishly in both cases. The case of Romina Núñez several years ago literally shocked the whole of Spain with its unimaginable cruelty and cynicism. The very situation in which this unfortunate young woman found herself, we can say, typical. Her husband beat her, and she kept silent, hoping that he would change. However, the denouement of this story shocked even experienced investigators who have seen everything in their practice. The victim's body was never found, only a fragment of it, which the sea threw ashore. But how did it happen? And could the tragedy have been avoided? To answer these questions, you need to understand who Romina was and why she never dared to admit to anyone, in what trouble she found herself. Who is Romina Núñez? Romina Celeste Núñez Rodriguez was born in the fall of 1990 in the city of Asunción, the capital of Paraguay, and was the eldest of two daughters in a poor working-class family. Parents separated when the girls were still young, so their mother, whose name was Miriam Rodriguez, had to raise the children on her own. The woman had to work several jobs at once because her ex-husband did not help them financially at all and did not show any interest in the fate of the daughters. When she was still a schoolgirl, Romina got a job in order to help her mother and younger sister somehow. At the age of 17, the girl began a romantic relationship with a guy whose name was Christopher. He wooed her beautifully. They made plans for a joint future. But happiness ended as soon as Núñez learned that she was expecting a child and reported this to her lover. The young man immediately gave the chosen one an ultimatum. Either she terminates the pregnancy or they part forever. Romina deeply hurt the words of her lover, but after consulting with her parents, with whom she has always been very close, the girl decided to keep the child. Most of all, she feared that having had an abortion at such a young age will never be able to become a mother again, so there was only one way out. Christopher kept his word. He broke off all relations with the girl and was never interested in her fate and the fate of his child. Romina, at the age of 18, gave birth to a son whom she named Lucas. However, with the advent of a baby in the family, and so deplorable financial situation worsened even more. Money is catastrophically lacking. And Mother Romina had to now support a grandson, moving to Spain. Romina, depressed by the situation, she wanted to somehow correct the situation and help her family. But find a decent job with good pay in Paraguay, she still could not manage. Then the girl called her maternal aunt, who lived in sunny Spain, and the relative invited her niece to her place, assuring her that it would be easier for her to settle down here and that there were more prospects in Europe than in Latin America. Not thinking long, the girl packed only the most necessary things, and having earned an airplane ticket to Spain, went on the road. She left her 2-year-old son in the care of her mother and sister for a while, deciding that she would pick him up as soon as she found a new place to live and a stable job. In the late summer of 2010, Romina flew to Madrid and from there traveled to its suburbs, the provincial town of Alcobendas, where she settled in the house of her aunt. Romina immediately actively began to look for work, and she smiled at her luck. Attractive and sociable beauty got a job as an administrator in a hotel, where she received a decent salary. Part of the money she sent home, and for the rest rented a separate apartment, so as not to embarrass hospitable relatives. Soon, Núñez met a man named Javier, with whom she had a stormy romance. The favorite a few years ago, just like her, emigrated to Europe in search of happiness and a better life. He was a native of the Republic of El Salvador, worked in construction, and seemed to be a serious man. However, when the girl became pregnant, the situation repeated itself. Javier was not ready for the appearance of children, but nevertheless, the couple tried to live together for a while. Unfortunately, soon after the birth of their common son, they finally broke up. The girl was again in a difficult situation because she was in a foreign country with an infant in her arms and simply did not know how to be further. For a while, she returned to her aunt's house, where she was accepted and helped in every way possible. When the boy was only about 6 months old, the young mother went back to work because she could not work. But a few months later, a new shock awaited the girl. For a long time, she ignored the poor health and weakness, writing it off to stress and fatigue. However, when Romina still went to the doctor, she was diagnosed with cancer. The young woman underwent several courses of chemotherapy, lost her hair, lost a lot of weight, but overcame the insidious disease. After treatment, the girl quickly recovered. She continued to work and hid the lack of hair with the help of wigs. Romina believed that the hard trials, which she managed to steadfastly overcome, will certainly be followed by a period of happiness. She saved money and planned to take not only her eldest son, but also her mother and sister to Spain. New lover. In the summer of 2017, at an event where Núñez went in the company of friends, she accidentally met a man named Raúl Díaz Chicón. He was good-looking, able to impress others, had a serious job, and was financially secure. He liked the smiling beauty, and he became interested in her, asking mutual acquaintances. Romina also liked this statuesque beauty, and when he soon asked her out on a date, she gladly agreed. Raúl was almost 15 years older than Romina, and he worked as a leading process engineer for a large energy company. He had a couple of failed marriages under his belt and had 2 teenage daughters from previous relationships. But the girl was not intimidated by the age difference at all. As for her personal life, she had a similar situation, with the only difference being that she was raising sons from 2 failed previous affairs. It only took one date for the couple to realize that they were in love and they didn't want to part with each other anymore. Romina, overwhelmed by her new feelings, literally fluttered around, telling her friends how happy she was. Her new lover gave her small gifts and pleasant surprises almost every day. He arranged romantic dates, sent flowers with touching cards, and said compliments. Romina believed that she had finally met her true love and found a man who would accept her and her sons. However, soon the girl began to reach very unpleasant rumors about her chosen one. In particular, it was said that he was rude and even cruel with his previous spouses, and because of this, in fact, broke up both his marriages. But Núñez did not want to believe it, although she drew attention to the fact that Raúl did not maintain any relations not only with his former wives, but also with his daughters. However, a significant difference in age and the presence of heirs from previous relationships on both sides did not become an obstacle for the lovers. Just 6 months after meeting, they decided to live together and settled in a luxurious villa on the island of Lanzarote, part of the Canary Islands. This place seemed to the girl a real paradise, but her happiness lasted only a short time. From a dream man to a domestic tyrant. First-time lovers lived in threes, along with Romina's youngest son. Raúl tried to treat the child well, and the girl even thought that he would be an ideal father for her boys. She herself, Raúl, promised a long and happy life together, in which she would not need anything, and he would fully provide for her and the children. The girl in love believed the words of the chosen one, and when he offered her to become his lawful wedded wife, without hesitation, agreed. But only Raúl insisted that they need time for 2, so that they could be alone and enjoy each other's company in full after the wedding. In fact, he not only did not want to take Romina's eldest child from Paraguay, but also dreamed of getting rid of her youngest son. However, the young mother believed her lover and did not listen to what her friends told her, who noted the strange behavior of the man. In June 2018, Chicón bought for the bride and her child tickets to Paraguay and 1 return ticket, just for Romina. When the girl flew home and told her mother and sister about her chosen one, the women were somewhat confused by Raúl's behavior. They doubted the sincerity of his intentions and assumed that he just wanted to get rid of someone else's child in his house. But the girl was offended by such talk, and she even had a little quarrel with her loved ones. A few days later, she flew back to Spain, promising that in the fall she would fly back for the boys. When Romina returned, a warm welcome awaited her, and for 2 months, she was perfectly happy alone with Raul. However, in August, just a few days before the wedding, a man brutally beat Romina. This incident was a real shock to her, but the groom, literally on his knees, begged her forgiveness, promised that such a thing will never happen again, and she believed him. Núñez did not file a police report on her lover and did not tell anyone about what happened. And on August 10th, making up bruises on her face, she went to the wedding with the man who would soon take her life in cold blood. One last trip home. 2 weeks after the wedding, the girl flew back home to Paraguay, not to pick up her sons as she had planned earlier, but just to see her family. Her mother and sister were quite puzzled by the changes that had happened to her in the short time they had not seen each other. Romina looked upset and even lost. She had a noticeable limp, and there were bruises on her neck, which she tried to hide with a scarf. To all questions, Romina either kept silent or claimed that she had accidentally injured herself. Romina spent almost a month at home, which also surprised her relatives as she had just gotten married. However, the newly married wife said that her spouse himself suggested that she visit the children because she had not seen them for a long time and missed them very much. Then Miriam even praised her son-in-law for his generosity. But still, the woman did not understand what was going on and why her daughter looked so unhappy. In mid-September, Romina, secretly from her mother, borrowed money from relatives for a return ticket to Spain because her husband simply refused to pay for her return. This should have been a clear signal that flying back was not worth it, but Núñez still hoped that everything would work out and the marriage would be happy. On September 17th at the airport, her mother, sister, and sons saw her for the last time. The mysterious disappearance of a mother of 2 children. Since returning to her husband, Romina's life every day more and more resembled a terrible dream. Raul, as it turned out, used illegal substances, and now he stopped hiding his addiction from his chosen one. Being under the influence of illegal substances, he turned into a real beast and literally tortured his wife. But every time she tried to leave him, the man promised to stop and swore that this would not happen again. Usually after the beatings and threats, there was a temporary lull, when the husband became loving and caring again, gave gifts and arranged romantic dates. But such periods became shorter and shorter, and scandals with manhandling occurred more and more often. Shortly before the new year, Romina confessed to her best friend that she is afraid of her husband and believes that one day he may kill her. On December 29th, Raul again beat his wife, so much so that she was forced to seek medical help. The hospital suspected something wrong and wanted to call the police to record the fact of beating. But at that moment, her husband appeared in the department and said that Romina had fallen herself and there was no need to involve law enforcers. The girl only confirmed his words and, refusing hospitalization, went home. On January 1st, 2019, Miriam, Romina's mother, tried to call her daughter several times, but she did not pick up the phone. Then the woman dialed her spouse's number to find out what was wrong, but there was no answer either. After several days of silence, the mother-in-law sent Raul a message in which she wrote that she was going to go to the police. This time, the son-in-law reacted instantly and called back, saying that he and Romina quarreled on December 31st, after which she packed her things and left him. The man assured that everything is fine. Soon the wife will cool down and return. Because before, according to him, this has already happened. But Romina's mother was not convinced by the words of her son-in-law. She felt that something had happened to her daughter and insisted that Raul went to the police. Only on January 8th, under pressure from relatives of the wife, Raul still filed a report on the disappearance of his wife. However, this time he told a slightly different story, adding that after the quarrel, his wife had taken his money, and he thought that Romina might have flown to Paraguay to visit the children, so he was not particularly worried until his mother-in-law called him yesterday. What is Raul hiding? Raul was constantly confused in his testimony and contradicted himself, which caused a lot of questions and suspicions. Then the law enforcers seriously decided to take him seriously, as well as to find out how the couple's life had been. Having questioned friends and relatives, they realized that not everything was not smooth in this marriage. Romina repeatedly complained to loved ones about her husband's abuse, but never went into details, and others often noticed bruises and abrasions on her body. It was decided to put Ciccone under secret surveillance, and all his telephone conversations were tapped. But the man seemed to sense that he was being watched, and for a long time behaved extremely cautiously, not giving any clues or reasons to suspect himself of anything. Nevertheless, the investigation continued, and soon it became known about the visit of Núñez to the hospital on December 29th with signs of serious beatings, and how her husband almost forcibly took her away from there, forbidding her to go to the police. And a few months earlier, Romina did file a domestic violence report, but withdrew it the next day. A week later, Raul calmed down a bit, and in a telephone conversation with his relative, who worked in the police, blurted out that his wife was no longer alive, but her body would never be found. This was a good reason for the man's arrest as the main suspect in the case, and his detailed interrogation at the station. The suspect's version of events according to Raul? His wife had had too much to drink on New Year's Eve and began to scandalize him, demanding that he immediately move her children into their home, and when he said he was not ready for that, she threw a tantrum, started fighting and throwing at him everything she could get her hands on. Then the man allegedly left the house for a couple hours until everything settled down, and when he returned, he found Romina in the bathtub without signs of life. According to his version, the woman suffocated because she was very drunk, but he was afraid that he might be suspected of involvement in her death, or even accused of murder. So Raul decided to remove all traces and then report her disappearance. But the way he admitted he had disposed of the body shocked everyone. Ciccone said that he decided to burn the woman's body on a barbecue in the courtyard, and since they lived in a luxury complex with a large surrounding area, the neighbors could not see what he was doing outside his house and could not smell the odor produced by the burning of human flesh. However, Raul miscalculated because the barbecue did not work on the principle of a crematorium, and in a few hours the remains were not burned. Then he took them out of the fire, divided into parts, packed in different bags, and a couple of days later rented a car, which took the dismembered body in the wild and deserted part of the island, where he threw into the sea from the rocks. The search for the body and evidence police spent weeks combing the shoreline in and around the areas where Raul said he dumped bags of his wife's remains. Divers were also involved in the search for body fragments on the bottom, aviation, and a considerable number of volunteers. But all efforts did not bring any results. Meanwhile, on January 16th, Romina's husband was formally charged with domestic violence as well as the murder of his wife. This came after his home was thoroughly searched using specialized equipment and luminol, which revealed numerous washed-up traces of blood in various rooms. It was also found that the man had been ordering caustic soda, used to remove organic contaminants, and paint from the internet. As it turned out, in one of the rooms on the second floor, he was so thoroughly mopping up a bloody stain on the flooring that he damaged it and decided to paint over it. According to the version of the investigation, it was in this room that the suspect dismembered the body of his spouse. Moreover, there on the floor was found a broken fragment of Romina's fingernail with traces of blood and Raul's epithelium, which could indicate that the victim was alive and resisted. Also in the bathroom, on the tiles on the wall, they found Romina's contact lens stuck on the wall, which could have gotten there from a strong blow to the face. Unfortunately, despite their best efforts, law enforcers were unable to find any remains. But at this point, the station received a call from a tourist who reported that a lung fragment had been thrown onto the beach. He could not say with certainty whether it belonged to a human or an animal, but having heard that a body was being searched for on the coast, decided to report his find to the police. Toward the end of February, an expert examination confirmed that the lung fragment found belonged to the missing Romina. Trial and conviction. Despite the evidence found and the results of the examination, Raul continued to insist on his innocence. He stuck to his initial theory that the woman had drowned herself in the bathtub while highly intoxicated. Although evidence found in the house indicated a fierce struggle, the man also said he did not use any implements or tools to dismember the body. He allegedly tried to burn it completely on a barbecue, and afterwards the remains, due to prolonged exposure to the fire, fell apart on their own, and he just put them in bags and took them away. Such a claim was untrue for several reasons. First, the body of the adult Romina could not have been placed on the fixture in his yard. Secondly, even after prolonged exposure to such temperatures, the bones could not become so fragile that they could fall apart without the use of tools. And in order to separate the lung from the body, it was necessary to open the chest, which could not be done with bare hands. The investigation failed to establish how exactly Raul took the life of his wife, but judging by the traces of struggle found in the house, it was suggested that he could beat her to death. There was also no doubt that Ciccone had dismembered her body in the very room where he later had to repaint the floor to cover the bloody traces. Raul's trial was delayed by the COVID pandemic, so the sessions were repeatedly postponed and rescheduled. During this time, Raul changed several lawyers, and under pressure of evidence, he did admit that he had accidentally killed his wife during a scuffle, rather than finding her dead in the bathtub as he had previously claimed. Nevertheless, he continued to insist that she was drunk and violent. It was not until June 2023 that the defendant was finally found guilty, except that the sentence Romina's loved ones considered too lenient. The man was sentenced to 12.5 years for involuntary manslaughter, 2 years for proven domestic violence, 1 year for causing serious bodily harm in December 2018 when Romina went to the hospital, as well as several months for abuse of the body. As the world heralded 1993 with joy and resolutions, one man in London set an eerie New Year's resolution of his own, a resolution to become a notorious killer. His target? Unsuspecting men in the gay community. But who was Colin Ireland, and what drove him to declare such a harrowing resolution? Why did he choose to transform a symbol of new beginnings into a dark and twisted game of cat and mouse? Hi, my name is James. Welcome to True Crime Case Files. In today's deep dive, we peel back the layers of one of the UK's most calculated serial killers, a man who sought fame through the fear he instilled. We'll uncover the story of how he executed his plan with chilling precision and overshadowed a bustling city's celebratory spirit by a series of gruesome crimes. To understand the mind behind the moniker, the Gay Slayer, we must delve into the past of Colin Ireland. Born in 1954 in Dartford, Kent, Ireland's early life was marked by turbulence, upheaval, and poverty. His childhood, spent in an unsettled home, was the first chapter in a life marked by discontent and detachment. Raised by a single mother, Ireland's formative years were a carousel of different men entering and leaving his life. This instability laid the groundwork for a personality that craved control, a trait that would later manifest in the most sinister ways. His parents were unmarried 17-year-olds. His father left soon after his birth, and Ireland didn't know his identity. Due to his mother's money problems, they had to move a number of times. In spite of all the hardships, Ireland had a close relationship with his mother and remembered her as affectionate and benevolent. Ireland said that as a child, he was a thin, lanky little runt, always getting the worst of it from schoolyard bullies. This made Ireland frequently miss school. As a result, he didn't get a proper education and became sad and withdrawn, choosing his few friends among the most unthreatening kids. As a teenager, Ireland found himself entangled with the law. His crimes, though initially petty, hinted at a deeper struggle within, a struggle for identity and a desperate need to assert his significance in a world where he felt invisible. Constantly in trouble of his own making, Ireland was sent to Borstals and prisons for theft, robbery, blackmail, and burglary. He ran away to London at 16 and hung out in an amusement arcade with a bad reputation where young boys were targeted by pedophiles. Ireland was approached by some of them. Besides, one of his jobs was a bouncer on a gay club. That's where his understanding of gay subcultures came from. As Ireland himself described the 70s, I was entering what I call the lost period, common to those who suffer from psychopathy. In between custodial periods, a lot of the 70s were a blur. I spent my time detached and wondering. In 1982, Ireland married Virginia Zammit, who was confined to a wheelchair. His colleague witnessed a pleasant family life when he visited them. They divorced 5 years later after Ireland's adultery. In 1989, he married Janet Young. He was abusive and after 4 months left his wife abruptly when she was away for the weekend, stealing over £10,000 from her account and leaving her completely broke. He moved to Southend-on-Sea, Essex, roughly 60 kilometers east of London, and lived in a hostel there. Later, he moved to his own flat. There, in this flat, Ireland decided to become a serial killer as his New Year's resolution. Drifting through adulthood, Ireland's life was a patchwork of odd jobs and fleeting relationships. But beneath this veneer of normalcy, there was a growing fascination with infamy and a desire to etch his name into criminal history. Ireland immersed himself in the dark world of serial killers. He studied them, not with a sense of horror, but with an analytical eye. What made them tick? How did they elude capture? These were the questions that consumed him. He spent many hours reading about serial killers and learning about geographic profiling, hence deciding to commit his murders far away from his home. A killer usually commits crimes in a certain radius of about 7 miles from his home. That's why Ireland chose London for his crime scene. He also planned to have at least 5 victims, because he had read that a person needs to have such body count to qualify as a serial killer. The year 1993 witnessed a terrifying series of crimes that shook the core of London's LGBTQ+ community. Colin Ireland, a man whose unassuming demeanor masked a sinister agenda, embarked on a calculated campaign of terror, meticulously planning and executing a series of murders with chilling precision. Ireland's hunting ground was the vibrant gay scene of London. He frequented the Coercion Club, a known gay bar, seeking out his potential victims. Here, amid the pulsing music and crowded dance floor, Ireland would select and study his targets, plotting their fates with cold detachment. Ireland sought men who liked the passive role and S&M, so he could easily restrain them as they believed it was a sexual game. Members of the pub would wear color-coded handkerchiefs to indicate their sexual proclivities. Ireland was posing as a dominant partner. His first victim, Peter Walker, was a 45-year-old choreographer. Ireland met Walker at the Coercion, and what started as a night of perceived intimacy quickly turned into a nightmare. Walker's body was discovered in his apartment, revealing the horror of Ireland's actions. Bound, gagged, and suffocated by a plastic bag placed over his head, Walker's death was just the beginning of Ireland's gruesome spree. Ireland placed 2 teddy bears in a sexual position on Walker's body and burned some of his pubic hair so he could smell it. While searching the flat, he discovered that Walker was HIV positive. Enraged, Ireland stuffed a condom into Walker's mouth and another one into his nostril. Each crime scene told a story of meticulous planning and ruthless execution. He carried a murder kit, a rope, handcuffs, and a change of clothing. Ireland left little evidence behind, confounding the police and instilling a growing sense of fear within the community. He was methodical, ensuring each scene was thoroughly cleaned, removing any traces that could lead back to him. He also stayed in the flat till morning to avoid suspicion from leaving in the middle of the night. To describe the nights after his murders, Ireland said, "I think that affected me mentally to quite a degree, sitting with his body for 5 to 6 hours, watching him gradually get blotches, go cold. It wasn't something that I could cope with, to be honest." Ireland disposed of all the things he touched by throwing them out of a train window on his way back to Southend. When the police discovered the body, they assumed it was the result of a sexual game gone wrong. 2 months later, Ireland returned to the pub where he met 37-year-old librarian Christopher Dunn, who invited Ireland to his flat. Ireland tied, handcuffed, then beat and tortured his helpless victim before suffocating him by stuffing pieces of cloth into his mouth. After murdering him, Ireland used Dunn's PIN and bank card to withdraw $200 from his account. The police assumed it was an accident as a result of a sex game and didn't link his death to walkers. Ireland was getting more and more confident as his New Year's resolution was coming together. Ireland met 35-year-old businessman Perry Bradley III at the Coleherne pub. He was the son of Texas Democratic Party fundraiser Perry Bradley Jr. In his Kensington flat, Bradley refused to be tied, but Ireland told him that he couldn't perform sexually without it. Bradley reluctantly agreed, and then Ireland told him that he was a thief and he just wanted his money and PIN. After Bradley gave Ireland his PIN, Ireland told him that he should try to fall asleep, as he wouldn't leave his flat till morning. Bradley did fall asleep, and Ireland realized that Bradley could identify him and strangled him. Then he placed a doll on top of the dead man's body. The heinous crimes of Colin Ireland not only sent shockwaves through the communities he targeted, but also captured the relentless gaze of the media. The press dubbed him the Gay Slayer, a moniker that sensationalized his horrific acts and underscored the homophobic undercurrents of the time. Within 3 days, on June 7th, Ireland was back at the Coleherne. He met 33-year-old Andrew Collier, a housing warden, and went to his home. Again, Ireland handcuffed and tied his victim to the bed, demanding his bank details. After killing Collier's cat, Ireland strangled Collier. He placed a condom on Collier's penis and fastened the dead cat's mouth over it, and put the cat's tail into Collier's mouth. On June 15th, Ireland met Maltese chef Emanuel Spiteri. Aged 41, he cuffed, bound, and strangled his victim, then stayed in his flat watching TV and eating Spiteri's food. After cleaning the scene, Ireland set fire to the flat, but it only caused minor damage. As the body count rose, so did the alarm. The gay community, already marginalized, now found itself in the grip of a predator who walked among them, unseen, unknown, and deadly. But what was the motive behind these abhorrent acts? Was it a deep-seated animosity towards the gay community, or something more cold and calculated? And what were the critical mistakes Ireland made, and how did they lead to his capture? As the death toll rose, London's Metropolitan Police found themselves grappling with a cunning predator. The investigation into Colin Ireland's crimes was a race against time, a complex puzzle that demanded not just diligence, but innovation in the face of a killer who seemed always one step ahead. Initially, the investigation faced significant challenges. Ireland's careful planning and meticulous cleanup at each crime scene left frustratingly few clues. The killer's methodical approach in disguising his identity and movements compounded the difficulty, turning the investigation into a labyrinthine task. Detectives were confronted with a disturbing pattern. All victims were men from the gay community, their bodies discovered in their own homes, a sign of trust, brutally exploited. This realization led to a focused investigation in London's gay scene, particularly around the Coleherne pub where Ireland hunted for his victims. The breakthrough came from meticulous police work and a stroke of luck. A forgotten fingerprint at a crime scene, a chance capture on one of London's first CCTV cameras. These were the pivotal moments that began to unravel Ireland's web of deceit. When Ireland was in Andrew Collier's flat, they heard a noise outside and came up to the window. Ireland gripped a horizontal metal bar across the window and forgot to wipe it off. The police then found these fingerprints. And finally, Ireland was captured on CCTV. Some witnesses said Spiteri left Coleherne with a man. Then police traced his route home. His train journey went through Charing Cross Station, fitted with one of London's first CCTV cameras. Each piece of evidence was a precious key, unlocking parts of a puzzle that Ireland thought he had so carefully hidden. But what was it that finally led to Ireland's downfall? How did the police connect the dots in a case that seemed to defy resolution? The relentless pursuit of justice in the Colin Ireland case turned a crucial corner with a single seemingly innocuous phone call. Ireland, emboldened by his actions, made a call to the police, taunting them about his crimes. The day after Peter Walker's murder, having heard no news reports of his crime, he anonymously called the Samaritans and the Sun, telling them that he had murdered Walker and locked his dogs in another room. Later, the police received a call from Dunn's killer taunting them because they had failed to link his death to Walker's. In his next anonymous call to the police, he asked, "Are you still interested in the death of Peter Walker? Why have you stopped the investigation? Doesn't the death of a homosexual man mean anything? I will do another. I have always dreamed of doing the perfect murder." After Collier's death, Ireland called Kensington police and said that he had killed 4 men and they had to stop him. He told the police that he had read many books on serial killers and said, "If you don't stop me, it will be 1 a week." He told the police that he had studied the FBI manual, that is, Whoever Fights Monsters, by ex-FBI agent and serial killer specialist Robert Ressler. "I have got the book," he said. "I know how many you have to do." Ireland later said that the TV crime series, The Bill, had also given him many of his ideas and police evasion methods. Forensic psychologist Professor Michael Brooks said, "Just because you read books about serial killers doesn't mean you have any interest in becoming a serial killer yourself. But if that is your motive, then actually reading books can give you an awareness of the ways in which serial killers have acted in the past." Armed with this new evidence, the police intensified their efforts. A suspect started to take shape from the shadows. It was a breakthrough moment in the investigation, a lead that they desperately needed. On 19th of July, 1993, Ireland went to his solicitor. He said that he was on the CCTV, but that he had not killed Spiteri. He went to his flat for sex, but there was another man. He didn't want a threesome and left. The investigation took a dramatic turn as law enforcement officers matched Ireland's fingerprint to the Collier crime scene. His arrest was a moment of triumph mixed with stark horror as the extent of his crimes came to light. Ireland's overconfidence combined with advanced police work and the critical clues helped bring the killer to justice. The capture of Colin Ireland was more than just the conclusion of a manhunt. It was a moment that brought some semblance of closure to the victims' families and a community shaken by fear. It also opened up vital conversations about the safety of marginalized groups. The trial of Colin Ireland was set to be a gripping chapter in British legal history, raising questions about the nature of evil and the psyche of a man who sought infamy through brutality. What revelations would his trial bring? A legal journey that would reveal the full extent of his chilling crimes was just beginning. The trial was a meticulous dissection of Ireland's actions, each day unraveling more about the man behind the murders. The prosecution presented a case built on a foundation of solid evidence. Ireland, facing overwhelming evidence, made a decision that stunned the courtroom. He confessed to his crimes, detailing them with a cold detachment that sent shivers down the spines of all present. His confession was not just an admission of guilt, but a hair-raising narrative of his calculated and brutal actions. Ironically, pleading guilty to all his murders and confessing, Ireland avoided the publicity he so deeply craved. The heart of the trial, however, lay in the stories of the victims. Their lives, tragically lost, remind us of the human cost of hate and prejudice. Were these 5 murders Ireland's only crimes? Or did he kill others? Serial killers often withhold some of their murders from the police to gain a sense of control over them, even in prison. In January 1993, soon after Ireland's resolution, the police found a dead gay man in his home in Soho. They believed this might have been done by Ireland. However, the gay slayer never claimed this crime. Along with his other victims, a perilous shadow loomed over Hollywood star Tom Cruise. In a chilling twist of fate, Cruise, then at the height of his career and married to Nicole Kidman, narrowly escaped a potentially fatal encounter. According to statements and police files that later surfaced, Ireland had spotted Cruise in a London bar in 1993. Driven by a perilous and misguided belief, Ireland falsely assumed Cruz to be gay and plotted to make him one of his victims. The killer's sinister plan was unexpectedly thwarted. Cruz, possibly sensing something amiss or merely coincidental in his timing, left the bar abruptly, eluding Ireland's grasp. Ireland's conviction was a foregone conclusion, but the sentencing phase was a crucial moment. The judge, in a powerful address, condemned Ireland's actions, emphasizing the gravity and premeditated nature of the crimes. The judge called Ireland exceptionally frightening and dangerous. He said to him, "To take one human life is an outrage. To take 5 is carnage. In my view, it is absolutely clear you should never be released." Ireland was sentenced to 5 counts of life imprisonment for the murders. But the story does not end with Ireland's conviction. There are unconfirmed rumors that Ireland strangled his cellmate, a convicted child killer, in Wakefield Prison, Yorkshire. After that, he was transferred to maximum security lodgings at Whitemoor Prison, Cambridgeshire, into a private cell of his own. His pattern of selecting victims, meticulous planning, and the psychological games played with law enforcement are now studied in criminal psychology courses worldwide. Moreover, the investigation into Ireland's crimes highlighted the importance of community involvement in criminal cases. The breakthroughs in this case were a result of not just police work, but also the cooperation of the community, which had been terrorized by his actions. Ireland's case became a catalyst for discussions about homophobia and hate crimes. It highlighted the urgent need for societal change, not just in policy, but in everyday attitudes and understanding. Ireland died on 21 February 2012 of pulmonary fibrosis and a fractured hip he had suffered earlier. Former prison governor Vanessa Frake, who had crossed paths with numerous hardened criminals, called Ireland the most frightening prisoner she has ever come across. She said, "I don't know what it was about him. He just emanated evil." He was proud of what he did, same as many other serial killers. What drives a man to commit such calculated and brutal acts of violence? To understand Ireland's psyche, we delve into the complex labyrinth of his mind, piecing together a profile that is as disturbing as it is intriguing. Experts who have studied Ireland's case point to a combination of factors. His troubled childhood, marked by instability and lack of a father figure, may have sown the seeds of his later behavior, but it was his deep-seated desire for recognition, a craving to leave a mark on the world, that propelled him into the abyss of serial killing. Ireland's methodical approach to his crimes suggests a high level of intelligence and planning. He studied serial killers, not with repulsion, but with a scholar's interest. He learned from their mistakes, aiming not just to evade capture, but to master the art of killing. Ireland's methodical approach to his crimes offers a chilling glimpse into the mindset of a serial killer. His need for control and recognition, coupled with his ability to blend into society, challenges our understanding of criminal behavior. Forensic psychologists theorize that Ireland's choice of victims from the gay community was strategic rather than personal. He saw them as easy targets, vulnerable due to societal marginalization. This choice reflects not just a cold-blooded strategy, but a chilling indifference to human life. He said about how he chose his victims, "I think it's been something that's been triggered in me some time before. I felt if I was approached, it was likely that I would kill. I thought to myself, if I wasn't approached, something wouldn't have happened. I would have gone on my way and nothing would have happened." Forensic psychologist Professor Michael Brooks explained, what he does is he reduces the chance of choosing an inappropriate victim or somebody who wasn't going to respond by not selecting those who didn't approach him. Perhaps the most terrifying aspect of Ireland's psychology is his lack of remorse. His confessions were devoid of emotion, his recounting of the crimes clinical. This detachment points to a possible psychopathic personality, where empathy and conscience are alarmingly absent. Detective Inspector Martin Finnegan said, "He was very factual about his acts, as if he was describing someone else's activities. Absolutely no compassion at all. I didn't detect much hatred. It was just matter of fact, like, I went down the shops and bought this, went into the flat and killed him." In most cases, the murderers who kill gay people are gay themselves, and those blatantly homophobic are often secretly gay. Was it really a plausible excuse for Ireland to give in to his secret emotions? Ireland compared the buzz of his first kill to that of losing his virginity. Maybe these hidden feelings brought this simile to his mind. Was Ireland just dishonest with himself and others, trying to hide what he really couldn't control? Ireland said he was heterosexual and didn't touch or have sex with the men he killed. However, it's difficult to imagine that at least 5 people invited him to his flat for sex, undressed, and let Ireland tie them without even a single kiss. Can a person even decide to become a serial killer as a career just for the sake of it, without any ulterior motives? And choose the specifics of his crimes by pure logic? Or is it something deeper? Or was theft the real reason of Ireland's crimes, and murdering his victims was a calculated move to prevent them from identifying him later? There's inconsistency in Ireland's story about the murder of Perry Bradley. He said that he had promised Bradley to leave him alive, but then it occurred to him that Bradley could identify him. This narrative strongly contradicts with his whole intention of choosing his victims for murder to gain fame from becoming a serial killer. Was Ireland just exploiting homophobic moods in the society to mask the mercenary nature of his crimes, hoping that it will win him sympathy of the public and reduce the term of his imprisonment? Or was there more than one reason, perhaps all of them combined? Tell me your thoughts in the comments below. Share your perspectives and let me know what other cases you'd like me to explore. Until next time.